Kurt, are you ready?
Yes. I'm out.
Let's begin this meeting. City Commission meeting for Tuesday, October 11th, 2022. First, we'll have some explanation of how the meeting... What?
Turn your video on.
Oh,
Are you on?
Just
sorry.
make sure.
I am now.
There you go.
Okay. Let's have first some explanation from Porter on how these meetings operate.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I just have a few housekeeping items for the Zoom meeting tonight. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting unless you are speaking. The chat function for this public meeting is disabled. All chats will go directly to me. Unless you are participating during the meeting, please turn your video off. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on screen. You will still be able to hear the meeting. When you are participating in the meeting, please turn your video on. If you have any trouble, you can send me a chat. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. Now I'll return the meeting back to Mayor Shipley.
Thank you. Next, we'll have some explanation of how public comment operates from Sherry.
Thank you, Mayor. When the mayor calls for public comment, individuals attending in person should approach the podium to indicate they wish to speak. The podium can be raised and lowered, and we encourage you to use this feature to ensure your comments are heard. Individuals participating via Zoom should use the raise hand function to indicate they wish to speak. Please leave your virtual hand raised until you are called on. Individuals will be called on in the order they appear on the meeting host screen. Please state your name before speaking, and all comments will be limited to 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the approval of the agenda. However, I do want to make sure, could you not block the entrance and the exit? That would be great. Could you move yourself from the exit? You can either sit or you could move over, but you cannot block the exit and entrance.
Ma'am, I apologize for blocking the exit.
You're still blocking the exit.
Oh, my goodness, I so apologize for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Let's approve the agenda. Are there any changes anyone would like to see made?
I move for approval of the agenda.
Second.
I have a first and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Vice Mayor Larson. Good to see you there. That passes 5-0. That brings us to proclamations. Let's proclaim October 2022 as Community Planning Month. Do we have someone here to speak on that?
Let's go.
Good evening, Commission. Jeff Crick with Planning and Development Services, and thank you for the proclamation. I have some staff, as you're probably very familiar with, Luke Mortensen and Sandy Day, who are here with us to hear about Planning Month, and just thank you for inviting and participating.
That's all you got?
All I got is all right.
All right.
It's all in the proclamation.
Well, I'm glad you're all here. Sandy, yeah, thank you. Whereas change is constant and affects all cities, towns, suburbs, counties, boroughs, townships, rural areas, and other places. And whereas community planning and plans can help manage this change in a way that provides better choices for how people work and live. And whereas community planning provides an opportunity for all residents to be meaningfully involved in making choices that determine the future of their community. And whereas the full benefits of planning requires public officials and citizens who understand, support, and demand excellence in planning and plan implementation. And whereas the month of October is designated as National Community Planning Month throughout the United States of America and its territories, and whereas American Planning Association endorses National Community Planning Month as an opportunity to highlight how planning is essential to recovery and how planners can lead communities to equitable, resilient, and long-lasting recovery. And whereas the celebration of National Community Planning Month gives us the opportunity to publicly recognize the participation and dedication of the members of the planning commissions and other citizen planners who have contributed their time and expertise to the improvement of the city of Lawrence and Douglas County. And whereas we recognize the many valuable contributions made by professional community and regional planners of the City of Lawrence and extend our heartfelt thanks for the continued commitment to public service by these professionals. Now, therefore, I, Courtney Shipley, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby proclaim October 2022 as Community Planning Month. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is to proclaim October 2022 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I believe Mr. Averill might be online.
Got to unmute, mate.
I'm here, yeah. So you think I know by now. We've had enough Zoom meetings that I'd have it on. Thank you so much, Mayor Shibley, and thanks very much to the commission. Should I talk now? Is now the time?
Please carry on.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to be a little bit wordier than the other group, but yeah, I wanted to say thanks to everyone. This is my 6th year in coming before the commission and proclaiming Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And it will actually also be my last year as I'm moving on to a different role within the community. But I wanted to let you all know that 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men, and 30 to 50% of trans and non-binary folks will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. Domestic violence has been traditionally treated as a private issue, but it is very much, in my opinion, a public health issue, and one which we should continue to take very seriously as a public health issue and work on innovative solutions. This month, in order to raise awareness for domestic violence, we're producing a number of events, including coming up here in a couple of days, a presentation at the Lawrence Public Library called In Their Shoes, which is a simulation game exercise about youth and healthy relationships, along with some terminology and how to recognize and assist those who may be in unhealthy or abusive relationships. On October 19th, we'll be having a conversation at the Cider Gallery about the language of domestic violence, phrases like gaslighting, love bombs, trauma bonding, to kind of raise awareness of the way in which we speak about domestic violence and the fact that it's not just physical or sexual in nature, that it can also be psychological and emotional, and sometimes those scars can be much, much deeper. On October 26th, we're going to have kind of a fun event. We're doing Nostalgia Nightmares. We're going to watch the movie 16 Candles with a couple of advocates from the Willow and point out that although we love this movie back in the 80s, it's got some seriously problematic behavior. So we'll be looking at nostalgic movies through a more modern lens. And I think that will be a fun and provocative way to address the issues and, the terminology behind domestic violence. And then on October 27th, we'll be having a Zoom presentation on domestic violence and public health. Working with the KU SELF program, through the engineering school, we determined that $1 in shelter services is the equivalent to $9 in emergency services. And we'll go through kind of the logic behind that, how we came to that figure, and what we can do to move people towards more prevention and education to lift the burden off of emergency services. Again, I just like to say thanks to everyone. I think we've created in the past 6 years that I've been working with the Willow some amazingly innovative public solutions to this crisis. Our transitional housing program through the Willow which was done in conjunction with tenants to homeowners, and the KU endowment provides 1 to 2 year leases at affordable rates for survivors who are saving up for more permanent housing. It is an extraordinarily innovative program. As far as I can tell, it is one of, if not the only, transitional housing in the program in the country that's specifically domestic violence related. So I'm really excited to see that. I'm really excited to see our foster support program continue to develop so that youth coming out of foster care who may not have access to support and information can get the help that they so desperately need and avoid ending up houseless or ending up in a trafficking situation. So these are the kind of innovation solutions we're working towards now. I hope we can continue to do that as a community in the future. And I want to thank you for being part of those solutions and encourage you to continue to think about how we as a community can confront and beat domestic violence. So thank you, Mayor Shipley, and thank you, Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Averill. I appreciate you. On to the proclamation. Whereas more than 20,000 calls are placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide every day, and whereas one domestic violence incident occurs every 23 minutes, and one domestic violence murder occurs every 11 days in the state of Kansas. And whereas in Douglas County in 2020, there were 773 reported incidents of domestic violence, 287 of which resulted in arrests. And whereas the impact of domestic violence is felt not only by individuals and families, but communities and a nation as a whole. And whereas Lawrence joins with others across the state of Kansas and nationwide in supporting domestic violence victims and survivors, the advocates and organizations who serve them, and holding offenders accountable in our community. Now, therefore, I, Courtney Shipley, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby proclaim October 2022 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And in recognition of the critical work being done by domestic violence advocates and allies in service of the survivors and victims they serve, I encourage all citizens to actively engage in the scheduled activities and events sponsored by Willow Domestic Violence Center and other organizations working toward an eradication of domestic violence. Thank you again for your work.
Thank you all very much.
Next, we have a recognition of St. John's Fiesta.
You know, with the domestic survivors movement, and I was.
Someone may not be muted on their Zoom. Thank you, please.
Thank you. I'm Frank Lemos on the committee of St. John's Mexican Fiesta. And I want to thank you, Mayor Shipley, and the rest of the City Commission for the honor of this proclamation for the St. John's Fiesta. We call it a party in our backyard of St. John's to invite the city of Lawrence and surrounding areas to come celebrate the Mexican-American culture that we've established here in Lawrence. Celebrate through music, through food, through laughter, through dance. We do it with the help of a lot of volunteers. So we thank all the volunteers. We thank St. John's, the staff, and the priests that have helped us throughout the years. Thank the City of Lawrence for always being on our side and helping us through it. Most important for me, I want to thank the Fiesta Committee. A lot of them are for the original members for 40 plus years. It took a pandemic to stop them just for 1 year. I've seen them battle through storms, through weather, through power outage. 1 year we had a renovation project and there was no blacktop to host it till the Wednesday before, and still they rallied to host the Fiesta. I'm very proud of this committee. They work hard, tirelessly, and they don't care about who gets the credit as long as the Fiesta is hosted. So I want to give them a thanks and an applause to them, and thank you all for this honor.
Let me go ahead and read the proclamation, the recognition. Whereas the St. John's Mexican Fiesta has been an annual fundraiser in Lawrence, Kansas for 42 years. And whereas the Fiesta highlights Mexican-American culture by sharing food, music, and dance with thousands of people every year. And whereas the St. John's Fiesta has awarded over $43,000 in scholarships to students pursuing higher education at a college, technical, or trade school. And whereas proceeds from the Fiesta also fund a Spanish language program for school children. And whereas the St. John's Mexican Fiesta is a beloved, fun, and unmistakably vibrant tradition in our community that will continue for many years to come. Now, therefore, I, Courtney Shipley, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, during this last week of National Hispanic Heritage Month 2022, do hereby recognize St. John's Fiesta for the dedication of hundreds of volunteers over 42 years who have made the St. John's Mexican Fiesta possible. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
I see you, Nick. Let's move on now to public comment. The public is allowed to speak on issues or items that are not scheduled for decisions on the agenda. Individuals should address all comments and questions to the commission. Comments should be limited to issues and items germane to the business of the governing body. The commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on the items presented during the time. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the room who would like to make general public comment? Mr. Flowers?
Hi, I'm Chris Flowers. I noticed we're doing this change where now everything needs to be germane to the business of the governing body, and I just want to. I'm here to announce how there are some loopholes to make just about anything germane to the business of the governing body. Number one, ask for the city to make a proclamation about the subject you're talking about. Telling the commission that 9/11 was an inside job is not germane to city business, but asking them to proclaim 9/11 an inside job is, because making proclamations is city business. If proclamations aren't relative to city business, then why are they constantly part of the agenda like earlier in this meeting? Also, it's not like the proclamations we make are always relevant to city business. In May 2017, the city proclaimed a Star Wars Day where they made a proclamation about how much joy the movie has brought to generations of people. So if proclaiming a day after a movie that has nothing to do with Lawrence is city business, then why shouldn't a proclamation about 9/11 or COVID not be considered city business? Number two, something like how to make something germane to city business. Ask the city for a letter supporting your cause. In 2016, a group of protesters came to City Hall demanding a letter of support against the Dakota pipeline. The pipeline didn't go through Lawrence or even Kansas, yet the city deemed it relevant to its business enough to issue a letter of support for those against the pipeline. So if the city can issue a letter of support against the pipeline happening in a different state, why couldn't it hypothetically issue a letter of support for those against any kind of COVID mandates? The COVID deniers could ask the city to send the letter to the CDC, and ta-da, it's now germane to the business of the governing body. So I'm just throwing that out there because I think you're trying to shut some people up. But if you're not, then wouldn't like this solution where we're making what they're saying, like teaching them how to make it germane to the business, to like city business, isn't that like a goal we should be doing if we're not trying to shut them up? Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Any other public comment? Any other public comment?
My name is Dr. Justin Spees. I'm running for Douglas County Commissioner in District 1 as a Republican candidate. I want to go over some numbers with you guys here. These are the numbers on the last day that Trump was in office and how things are today. So on the last day that Trump was in office, inflation rate was at 1.4%. Today it's at 8.3%. That's a little low. Gas was national average of $2.39 when Trump was in office. Today it's $3.76. The 30-year mortgage rates were at 2.65%. Today they're at 7.08%.
Dr. Spies, is there some way that we have control? Is there some way that this city commission has control over inflation?
The average rent prices were $1,625. Today they are at $2,039. The NASDAQ was up $13,300.
Mr. Spies, is there some way this city commission has control over the NASDAQ?
Please, Nazi. Thank you.
Is there any?
I'm making
Are
it
you
clear to you.
ready to be removed?
I'm making it clear to you that I would like. Can you stop my time?
No.
Why not?
Because so far you haven't said anything that has anything to do with this body.
The city considered how asinine the Democrats are. So thank you.
This is a
The NASDAQ is down 10,829 points.
Again, we have no control over the NASDAQ, Mr. Spies.
Today it's at 13.5%. The electricity rose 1.5%. Today it's at 15.8%. The real average hourly earnings increased 4%. Last day Trump was in office. Today
it's kind of you to come today, sir, but if you don't have anything
now that I'm
in the last 2 minutes.
to the business of the city, the reason why I bring this up is because I stand on the corner and I campaign, and one of my signs says that Democrat Patrick Kelly raised your property.
This is a nonpartisan body,
and that I never
whether
will.
anyone is Democrat or Republican is not
Can you stop,
relevant.
Nazi?
No, sir.
I'm trying to make my general public comment.
Is the city's time.
Yeah.
You must speak on items germane to this body.
I just did, Courtney.
No, you have not.
I'd like to make this a proclamation. What is going on here?
Rent and gas has nothing to do with the city of Lawrence.
It doesn't go through here, and when I'm bringing up,
I welcome you to leave this room, sir.
What's that?
You've been warned.
All right, let's do it then.
Okay.
Let's do it. Why are you shutting me down? I want to make this a proclamation.
Because you've yet to speak about a single thing to do with the body.
Let's go. So anyway,
thank you for leaving, sir.
People drive by and they shake their heads at me.
Excuse me, sir. You're finished.
And the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because Patrick Kelly had $55 million that he could have dipped into to decrease your property taxes. Instead, he increased them.
Until you leave, sir.
For what?
We have rules. I've made them clear to you.
What are the rules, Nazi? What are the rules, Nazi?
Nothing germane that you've said so far.
I want it to be a proclamation.
Thank you for
and
coming.
It's germane to you
You're
guys.
welcome to leave.
Nope, it's germane to. He just laid out that I can make this a proclamation. Why aren't you doing that? Why is that not important? Why is my idea not important? If I was in here about a gas pipeline that doesn't go through here, then it would be okay? Is that what you're saying?
You're welcome to leave, sir.
I don't want to leave. I want to finish speaking. You are the same person that sat up there and said you don't want white people up on boards. You're doing this because I'm a white guy. You're doing this because I'm a white guy.
Goodbye, sir.
Clearly, you're doing this because I'm white.
Goodbye, sir.
You are a racist. You are a Nazi. You are exactly what you say we are. You are exactly what you say we are. You are a Nazi. Each one of you are Nazis. And you are the I'm oppression, Miss Suppression. You're going to allow this to happen? She is suppressing me coming up here.
We have recessed this body, sir.
Fuck you. You're a Nazi.
Order.
Ready, Mayor?
Kurt?
Yes.
We will now return to general public comment. Are there any other people in the room who would like to make public comment?
Hi, my name is Sue Herrick. I have something here that's very germane to city business and probably very germane to all of us, because what happened to me today could very well happen to all of you. And I think it should weigh on your minds as city commissioners that, if, like I said, if it can happen to me, it can happen to you. This involves the Lawrence Journal-World. Chad Lawhorn, the editor of that paper, is frightened of me. Today I went to his office at the LJ World in person to see him. Put yourself in my place and ask what you would have concluded if, upon entering the building, a man in the doorway told you that Mr. Lawhorn was in a meeting and not available till 2 o'clock. And when I said I would return to see him then, this man very snarkily said to me, "Good luck with that." I politely asked why that was said, and he became even more nasty.
Ms. Herrick?
Aggressive and condescending.
This body has no control over either of the papers in this city. If you want to continue interrupting, you will also be removed.
I told him I was a paying subscriber and couldn't understand the behavior.
We have no control over the paper.
Police were being called. The upshot of it all is that the police talked to everyone and told me that a trespass was being placed on me, so that if I returned to the offices of the LJ World, I could be arrested, fined, or both. Anyone who wants more details can watch the video of this taken by two friends who are with me. The editor of the local newspaper, Chad Lawhorn, is so opinionated, so afraid of another viewpoint, and it might be yours, that he will have the police called rather than talk to a subscriber. That behavior translates, that attitude translates to his publications. The LJ World is controlled by someone.
Again, we have no control over either of the publications in this town.
Publication can't be trusted.
Could you speak more about the police interaction you had?
All of you, as commissioners, should be aware of him and his bias. Think twice before you consider what's published in the LJ World as reliable information. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment?
And before I start, there are police involved, so please don't interrupt me. There's something sinister going on in Lawrence, Kansas. Example, a shocking and unexplainable incident occurred today at LJ World. Unfortunately, the occurrence is not unique, as we've endured many instances of being treated with bias, aggression, and violence. Today, two of us joined Dr. Spees to go to LJ World so he could talk with Chad Lawhorn, editor, and ask questions about an upcoming LJ World publication which will highlight the 3 Douglas County Commissioner candidates. We go with Dr. Spees to everyday events like this because without fail, someone calls the police, so we have to video everything. This year, LJ World decided not to print the word-for-word responses in the Q&A section, breaking precedent from previous years where they published candidates' verbatim answers. It's clear they are doing this because they know Dr. Spees will have clear, concise, and commanding ideas for the future of Douglas County. The other 2 candidates will not. To sway the election, LJ World will create a story.
Did you have any comments about your police interaction?
To local readers. This is the same thing the county and city commissioners are doing by limiting public comments that have become uncomfortable for them. Today, LJ World, a staff member, greeted us at the door with an ugly attitude and clear dislike for Dr. Spees and us. We have never met this person before. He became increasingly agitated while talking to us. I made a comment that he looked angry because his lip was quivering. He then came at me with a shaking fist, and I felt threatened. Dr. Spees immediately called out this person and addressed the escalating aggression. An assault charge against him will go to the Lawrence DA. LJ World staff proceeded to call the police for reason unknown, so we awaited for their arrival. LJ World ended up trespassing all three of us for no reason, and one other officer was awaiting a call back from the strip mall owner, Cherry Hill, to ask if they wanted to trespass us from the entire strip mall. It's beyond me why the cop would go out of his way to ask the owner of that mall if they want to trespass us. The cop obviously didn't like us either because he was condescending and refused to answer basic questions. I told the officer that it seemed he was trying to make our lives more miserable, and soon we won't be able to do any business in Lawrence, as this isn't the first place to trespass as conservatives, just because they don't like us, I guess. It's not because we're breaking rules or laws. The officer's solution was that if we were trespassed and we needed to renew our driver's license, we could just drive to another county to use their DMV. In the city of Lawrence, Kansas, those who don't like our views are repeatedly protected when they discriminate against us, while the negative consequences always come our way. Before you know it, this will make national news, so you might want to do what you can to get a handle on it.
My name is Joe Herrick. I guess I have a question for the commissioners, and that would be, why do we call this public comment if we're constantly being censored? The reason that we don't have any control anymore is because we've completely abandoned our oaths of office and the Constitution of the United States. If you look at the First Amendment, it talks about free speech. The 14th Amendment, you treat all people equally. And we've completely thrown that into the trash. When you say public comment, that means that they can speak anything on any subject that they so desire. Now, most of the problems that we have in this country are because of our government leaders. As an example, let's look at the border. There's been
The city of Lawrence has no control over what happens at any border. Not Canada, neither Mexico. Could you comment on anything that...
Shut the time off?
No, sir.
Well, I'll tell you what. You have illegals in this town. That's my business. You have homeless in this town that aren't from our county or our city. And the more you subsidize them, the bigger the problem gets. You talked about having funds available to help people pay for their utility bills. You raised something like $3,700 with volunteers, taxpayers. But at the same time, we can spend 100 times that much on a ferry motel out by the police station. And by the way, the citizens voted against it. Is that correct? It's time we get back to the Constitution and treat people like human beings. The only thing I'd like to do is try to get people to think a little bit. That's just like they've known that these masks do not prevent a virus for 100 years. And if you look at the science...
The city has no control over mask usage or not mask usage. Over anything,
doesn't appear.
Well, then you can go to the state of Kansas and you can talk to those legislators. You continue interrupting.
He said it was a city policy.
Yeah, he did. He told us that.
What's the problem in here? We can't even have a decent conversation.
Time.
Thank you, Mr. Herrick.
Well, you took my time.
Thank you, Mr. Herrick. Any other public comment? Any other public comment?
Do I have any more?
No, sir.
Yes, I do.
Your time is up.
I'm going to take some time that you took away from me.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for not listening. Thank you for not giving people a public forum. Thank you for being
Are you ready to be removed? Thank you, sir. Mr. Aravi?
Why don't you just do Michael, Lawrence Accountability, because you never say my name right. So I'll get back to all this. 7 cops in this town in the last 10 years have been decertified and told they can no longer be police officers. I told you several weeks ago that they were trained to empty magazines. I told you that. And I have the video to prove it. You have 2 former Lawrence police officers right now on trial for rape. Not just rape, guys. Rapes that occurred while on duty. You have another officer currently going through the review process with C-Post. His hearing was held on August 4th. I'm publishing that entire hearing because your local newspaper is in the bag and doesn't want to talk about everything that came out in that hearing. A lot of details. And then we have another one that wrecks his car, DUI, and goes on paid leave per protocol. Turns out there's not a protocol. You know, if Chad Lawhorn would ask some questions, some of these things would actually come out. He has enough readers to do it, but he doesn't want to ask the questions. So that leaves it down to people like me and other people like Mackenzie Clark at the Times to start asking some questions around here. So a week ago yesterday, Lawrence police killed a guy. And they didn't just kill him once, they killed him 17 fucking times. I've come in here and I've talked to you guys about them training to empty clips. They're training for fucking war. And you saw it happened. At least you guys might get to see it. Because I guarantee old Lockhart ain't going to come out with some good video from that one, is he, Craig? So we can get pretty tense about city business, but you continually work so hard to shut people down. And all you do is create further animosity. That's all you're doing by doing that. It's not saving you any time in the meeting. You still ran the time for the 3 minutes. And when the 3 minutes is done, they leave. What is your issue? I mean, I think 30 seconds I would gladly give it to you if you would tell us what your issue is with the citizens of this town coming in here saying things you don't like control your fucking cops. Craig, since you're the actual chief,
You need to speak to the commission.
Found a way to interrupt. Good one.
Any other public comment in the room? Is there any public comment online?
Sherilyn Wells.
I'm concerned about the man that got shot, but not just what the police did. Evidently, his family had called about his welfare in some form or fashion 6 times before it came to the point that he got shot in front of his father's duplex. I don't know the family. I look at Facebook, and he is not the first person in Lawrence, Kansas that has asked for help with mental health or substance abuse problems where there has been a bad outcome. There is now supposed to be crisis intervention. I feel like there should be some kind of investigation of what went on. People can take people away, even the police, if they are considered to be a danger to themselves or others. And I just don't understand how things got to that point when the family was clearly asking for help. I mean, people are putting up voluntarily millions of dollars for crisis intervention. Not to be negative or hateful, but some kind of investigation of what went on before it got to the point that the police shot this man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Where were the beanbag shotguns?
All outbursts, that's your warning.
No, you don't need to.
Okay, you're welcome to leave then. You're welcome to
Where
leave.
were the beanbag shotguns?
You're welcome to leave.
Where were your beanbag shotguns that you guys like? Okay.
Is there any further public comment online?
That's all the comments, Mayor.
Okay, great.
That brings us to our consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Members of the public wishing to speak to an item that has been pulled from the consent agenda will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. Are there any items city commissioners would like to remove? Seeing none, Vice Mayor, anything? Okay, then I would make sure there's no one in the audience who would like to remove something from the consent agenda.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. It's the one about public records. I think it's E5A, where they're at, like, authorizing the city manager to, I guess, charge a reasonable fee.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further items? Is there anyone online who is interested in removing something from the consent agenda?
No, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Are there any motions?
I move for approval of the consent agenda with the exception of E5A.
Second.
I have a first and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Vice Mayor. That passes 5-0. Mr. Flowers, your comments on E5A?
Yeah, I was just wondering what exactly is reasonable, like to get a public record, what would be considered a reasonable fee? And I'm asking because one of the ways governments, like I know there are cases where they to get a public record, they charge a lot of money, and the more we're charging, the harder it's going to be for our journalists to request open records because they're going to be having to pay fees, and the more fees they pay, the less money they'll have in the long run on these public records. So, and also. There have been cases of government purposely charging fees that are hard to pay for. So I think we should have some kind of reasonable expectation what a reasonable fee is, just so we know that that our local government isn't purposely charging a high fee to try to keep the records from getting out in the open. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Is there any further public comment on this item? Bring it back to the commission, sorry. Any questions?
Just Commissioner Sellers, I was going to thank Mr. Flowers for bringing that up. The department I work in, we do have a core request consultant who does public records. We do have state statute that gives us a guiding practice on what reasonable fees are. That's KSA 45219. There is a Kansas website called the Revisor of Statutes, which is all state statutes. So the city can use that as guidance for reasonable fees. Reasonable fees, to my knowledge, and don't quote me on this, is not a defined term in state statute, but the statute does give us guidance on what is considered reasonable fees. And so if you look at KSA 45219 Section 5, there's some guidance there on that. So, and reasonable fees relate to copies, it relates to time that staff would need to use to pull files if that's not part of their normal job description and piece. So we have someone on file that does that. So those are things or variables that you can look at as it relates to reasonable fees.
And I'd only add that the Attorney General's division, oversees that, and those can be appeal to the Attorney General.
That as well.
Any other comments? Let's make sure there's no further public comment. Seeing none, is there anyone online who would like to comment on this?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. Bring it back to the commission.
I move to adopt on second and final reading ordinance number 9942.
Second.
I have a first and second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you, Vice Mayor. That passes 5-0. That brings us to the work session. To receive strategic plan update from the Connected City Outcome Team.
Do you want to read the little?
Oh, hold on here. Apologize. The work session provides an opportunity for the City Commission to discuss items in greater detail. The Commission will take no binding action on items presented during this time. Work session topics are eligible for live public comment. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Jake Baldwin, Engineering Program Manager with Municipal Services and Operations, and I'll be joined this evening by Nick Hoyt, another Engineering Program Manager with MSO, to present an update on the Connected City commitment area of the city's strategic plan. Our Connected City is focused on a well-maintained, functional, and efficient infrastructure and facilities, reflecting the city's commitment to our commitment to the well-being of all people. So on the Connected City outcome, there's 14 performance indicators. On this evening, we're going to focus on 2 of those. First, CC 4% of goals met for reliability of stormwater, and CC 13 miles of trails. And to begin, we'll begin with CC 13 miles of trails. So in 2021 and 2022, the city completed approximately 2 miles of new trails. Those 2 miles are broken down between 5 segments. The first being a half a mile in Hobbs Park as part of the Lawrence Loop Trail from 11th Street north to 9th Street. Another 0.2 miles on East 29th Street from the Haskell Rail Trail east to Haskell Avenue, again part of the Lawrence Loop. 0.6 miles of trail in the park on Heisenhower Drive behind the police facility. And another 0.7 miles of the Lawrence Loop Trail from Peterson Park to Michigan, which should be open this month. The 5th and final one that we don't have a photo of is the trail on Castle Drive adjacent to Hy-Vee on Clinton Parkway, a small section there. We've also got 3 visuals to help understand the numbers and segments we're talking about here. So this first map is the trails existing in the city as of 2020. I believe it represents 68.4 miles of trails at that time. Looking forward to the projects we just discussed briefly, 2021 and 2022, those projects in yellow there comprising of 2 miles added on to our map. And then looking forward again to projects that we anticipate getting completed in 2023. We've actually got 9 projects identified with trail components. You can see them in red on the map. Those red line segments equate to approximately 7 additional miles of trails. So as you can see, we're anticipating a lot of progress towards that performance indicator next year. With that, I will pass the presentation on to Nick to discuss stormwater, and will be available for questions when he's done presenting.
Thank you.
Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager. So I was asked to kind of give this Connected City presentation on stormwater. I felt like it's quite a ball to unwind, but I think this presentation kind of sets the stage for what we're going to talk about later. But it kind of is Nick's random thoughts about stormwater a little bit. I'm going to talk about some of the differences in the system in the city, the history of how the stormwater utility was established, some regulatory issues, and then talk about the CC4 performance indicators. Even though Lawrence is rather small geographically, or relatively small, there's some big differences in geography that affect the stormwater system. The south end is influenced by the Wakarusa River, north end by the Kansas River, but there's also 3 distinct, what I'm going to call system types. North Lawrence is obviously very different with the levee and pump station system. The older part of town around downtown is what I'm calling the fully enclosed system. That was mainly developed before World War II. And then the rest of town is generally the open channel system. So everyone's generally familiar with the levee when you cross the bridge here in town, and realizes that North Lawrence is in a floodplain. You'll notice it's quite flat here. We got some contours, and there's a lot of 810s and 820s. It does present some challenges. I know that sometimes there's blocks where the whole drop for 1,000 feet is about a foot, and it does make some challenges. But North Lawrence has regional challenges as well. There's the levee system is not just the one levee you see when you cross the bridge. There's approximately 16 miles of levee that goes into both Leavenworth County on the east side, Jefferson County on the west side, and then there's a separate levee north of the airport along Mud Creek. And then also the Maple Grove pump station that's at along North 2nd, it's not just pumping water out of North Lawrence, but there's about 2,000 acres north of town that drain into town and then are pumped out to the river by that pump station. So, like, the drainage challenges in North Lawrence, it's not just what's going on there. There's a regional issue there. I have always loved these pictures of Old Lawrence. Here, this one is an aerial view from 1880 from North Lawrence looking towards Mount Oriad. And ever since I was a kid, you always find something different. But today I'm going to draw our attention to Old West Lawrence. And what do we see here in Old West Lawrence? We see a drainage ditch going through Old West Lawrence that is not there today. Right now that's the Jayhawk sewer. So how did that get there? You know, you started with a natural channel. You put a tunnel inside it and fill around there. And then we put some houses on top just to make sure that life's exciting. So what happens there? There's a lot less conveyance after than before. And then the area upstream of that, we build parking lots and houses, and we get our yards graded right to the street, so everything runs off much quicker. So we have a much smaller area to convey the water, and then much more water coming through. So for the last 100+ years in the older part of town, the alleys and the streets kind of become part of the conveyance system. And we're going to get into that later of what is an acceptable level of conveyance in the alleys and the streets, but it is a challenge. So here's an example of that in real life. This is a picture from 2005 in the Burroughs Creek Trail, and you'll see that little 8x8 box in the middle of the creek. That's what was the fully enclosed storm sewer, and then the project was kind of widening the creek out as it is today. So this picture was taken during construction in 2005. All this water was trying to go through that little box in the middle of the creek. So obviously that wasn't happening very well, and this was a good situation where there's plenty of room to open it up. But there's similar situations where that creek is built, they put those houses right in there. So this is the lower end of what we recently modeled, what we call Northwest Burroughs Creek. And basically this downstream pipe was as big as can fit in that hole. It's not really sized for, it wasn't designed optimally based on what's upstream. It's how much can we fit through this little hole between these houses. So there's a challenge there in this fully enclosed system for what level of service we can provide, right? It's not, everything is not created equal because there's just challenges there compared to the open channel system. So the open channel system can be characterized by small enclosed systems draining the streets, a bridge or culvert of the roads going over the creek, and then a natural channel. And I'm going to put the natural channel in quotes because that's not the channel that was there, 100+ years ago in millennia. So when development happens, that natural channel that usually takes millennia to kind of move and meander. You know, we build a bunch of parking lots, we build roads, and then we put utilities crossing that creek, and then there is rapid change in the decades following that development. So here on the left, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a cable that's up in the air crossing the bottom of that creek, and then on the right, there's some other utilities, and that blob of concrete is actually a sanitary sewer. So all that stuff 30 years ago was covered by dirt, right? But then, so that channel, as development occurs, more water is rushing down quicker, it's eating down, it's eating out. And that is the main challenge for these natural channel systems. So here on the right, you can see that threatening somebody's fence. On the left, it's getting closer to some AT&T boxes and a sanitary sewer. There are small flooding problems in these natural channel issues, but they aren't kind of regional conveyance or regional flooding problems where the whole watershed's undersized. The erosion of the creeks is the problem of things that were built in the 60s. Generally, so far with the since I've worked at the city, when we've gone to put in expensive armoring or protection of that creek has been when the sanitary sewer has been threatened, right? When the erosion gets back to the sanitary sewer where that fails and that's going in the creek, that's when we take action to stop that. What you'll see in the next coming years is we're trying to make sure to get the setback requirements for new development right. So we make sure that we're starting out with everything set back from the creek where we don't have these type challenges, 20, 30 years after development. So those are the three system types. But within those systems types, there's different owners. So the city owns some things, and then there's private. Generally, what the city owns is what drains to the public street, right? It hits the public pavement, it goes in the public storm inlet. If it drains off someone's front yard, and once it gets to the street, then it's ours. And then once it enters the city's storm sewer, it's ours all the way till it's out of the city. We do a lot of kind of counseling, I would say, between private property owners when this one's water's going into their neighbor's house and there's kind of conflict there, but it's not, we aren't going to build anything as a solution. That's a private problem. Same thing with the parking lots. If it lands on a private parking lot or on private property and enters their private storm sewer or on a private street, it remains their private system until it enters ours. So like in this case, behind Target here is where our public storm sewer is. So everything is Target's problem on their parking lot until it gets back there. A couple other things to talk about that is detention. A lot of people, sometimes people aren't aware that they're responsible to maintain their detention and they didn't plan for that. But right now the city only maintains detention facilities that are on our property. Like the fire station has a detention basin behind it, right? So that's the city's responsibility to maintain, the different HOAs, or this is some combination of different commercial businesses. They're all responsible for maintaining their private detention basin. Changing that has huge implications. The streams are a little interesting. There's not much maintenance work. Really, the only thing the city does is if a large tree falls down and it's like blocking a culvert or something and causing a flooding issue, that will cut that tree out. But generally, the maintenance of the stream is, you let gravity do the work. Okay, so then a quick history of the stormwater utility. The 1993 flood was a major event here, and that kind of spurred the 1996 Storm Master Plan. Also around that same time, they were switching to phase 2 of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. So that we knew that was coming in advance in the later 90s, and we knew that that was going to apply to the city of Lawrence, where it hadn't before, since we were under 100,000. After that utility was established, several large capital projects were completed, and then in 2003 we had our first MS4 permit, municipal separate storm sewer system. 1993 flood wasn't just along the river. This picture in the middle is at 23rd Nosdale. It affected quite a few places in Lawrence. The master plan, it did several things. It listed about 40 some projects that were, deemed of different levels of priority to complete. It set up guidelines for what the rate structure should be, and then also what different staffing levels were recommended for the city. So at that time, this was the staffing that was established with the stormwater utility. The field crew has done lots of medium-sized projects and smaller repair-sized projects. It is a struggle to keep up with even the emergency projects today. And I guess I should say that this staffing this is from the late 90s, so this staffing categories and titles has all changed several times since then. We completed basically the 5 largest projects from the 96 master plan. And after these were completed, it kind of maxed out our bonding authority. We kind of maxed out the credit card on these, and then we had to pay that back over several years. So there wasn't as many projects completed there after that. Since then, the 2 larger projects were the Maple Street Pump Station in 2015, which was paid from, I believe, infrastructure sales tax, and then the 23rd Nosdale, which was mainly funded from turnback money from KDOT for 23rd Street. So that is kind of determined that we weren't, with the resources, weren't meeting the goals of the previous plan, and we've got more resources. So that, we're going to get into how we're going to use those resources later. But that's kind of the history of that, of why these large projects stopped, and there's a big gap there. The regulatory issues are mainly about, or they're completely about public outreach, public participation, and water quality. Regulatory issues aren't so much about flooding. So that's just something to keep in mind with our actual performance indicators. The first 2 are inspections, and that's from our permit that we have to inspect so much of our system each year. That will be very easy to do over the next couple years as we're doing the Storm Asset ID program. Then then we have percent of streets swept annually, which we're trying to average 4 trips around the city. I think it's much heavier. We do more than that in parts of town with much more leaves and stuff, and less than that in other parts of town. And then how quickly we're resolving the violation issues, which we just barely missed that goal, but I think we're going to get it in the future. Moving forward, we're going to talk about stormwater design criteria and nature-based or green infrastructure here in a little bit. Other things that'll be on your before you in the next year or so is updating land disturbance permits, and then that stream buffer ordinance I was talking about earlier, getting set back from that stream. And I think both of those are going to be tied into the development code updates that planning will be working on, or planning will be leading, I guess I should say. So hopefully that wasn't too boring. If you have any questions for me or Jake, I'm sure we'll be happy to take those.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. That was great. Any questions? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nick, I have a question for you. I know there, some of those, what you call them, the open conveyance systems, that they're owned either by individuals, or parts of them are owned by individuals, or they're owned by maybe an HOA.
Right.
And some concerns about, who is maintaining that, and if they, fill up with trees or whatever. Is there a plan to 1, analyze them, and 2, ever for us to somehow figure out how we maintain those?
I would say the plan is it is not, at least at my level, been any discussion about us taking maintenance over on those.
Do we tell people how to maintain them? Do we tell a homeowner there's a big tree growing back behind your house, cut it down, it's in our stream bed or something?
Well, I think you're mainly talking about the detention basins, like or do you think about the
No, I'm talking about like, I know there's one that an HOA is particularly concerned about that, it's near 31st and Castle.
Right.
That runs, right to the Castle Cove. And there's
right,
an HOA that has a very large stretch. There's a couple of apartment complexes that have very long stretches of open area.
Right. So, like on the north end of that, closer to Clinton Parkway, a couple of years ago, we had a sanitary sewer failure as that creek eroded back, and I want to say, it was in the $200,000 to $300,000 to repair and then just stabilize that section around the sanitary sewer. It is making sure people are aware of their maintenance responsibilities should be a priority, and I think just more on the education level. I guess I would say. I don't think there's been any talk at my level about taking over maintenance of those or changing that. And if there were,
I'm not saying it was. I'm just asking the question.
Because I think with the stream buffer ordinance, we could do a better job of educating the public. Because also, like in certain places, people want to mow right up to that creek bank, right? Where if you let the volunteer trees grow, then all that roots kind of hold it in better, and that kind of act as nature's stabilizing part of the stream bank. Is not as pretty. I know Mayor Shipley wants perfect lawns everywhere in town, manicured perfectly. But there are things you could do to reduce the erosion. But the actual maintaining of the detention basins, we're mainly looking at changing how those discharge and calculating the outpipes of those differently to control the downstream flow a little bit differently as part of the design criteria. I don't think I answered that question.
That's okay. I saw Matt turn his camera on.
Matt wanted to bail me out on here. I should have punted that 5 minutes ago.
If he wanted to say something to that.
So, Commissioner Finkeldine, well, first of all, Matt Bond, Engineer and Program Manager, AKA Stormwater Engineer. So on the newer developments, when we have platting, we dedicate a lot of those streams as drainage easements. And it's not so that the city can take over, but it's the property owner's still responsibility to maintain that, even if there's a drainage easement that's been designated on their property or dedicated to their property. That actually allows the city to get in there if we have some kind of obstruction to legally get in there and remove that obstruction. So, if we can reach it from the right of way around any of the bridge culverts or the smaller culverts or the storm sewer pipes, we do that. But Nick's right, we don't maintain any of those private streams that cut back through people's backyards. For one, we have an access issue to get to clean those out for the most part. But on all the newer development, if you've got that platted as a new property and there's a riparian area, we go ahead and dedicate that as drainage easement so that we can get in there if there's a problem. Because if you have a blockage, you're going to cause localized flooding and you're going to end up, artificially raising the water surface elevation and causing problems for, say, a walkout basement that happens to be upstream of that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I wanted to sort of be in that same vein that Commissioner Finkeldine was asking, which is about education. You're already awfully busy. What can we do to help with that education of what belongs to who and who's responsible for what? No pressure.
I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking off the top of my head, so that's always dangerous. Should we send letters to everyone that owns a detention basin within town and these are our records that show that you own that? I don't know. Because it is a struggle. Matt, bail me out again.
Yeah, so I'm Bond, Engineer and Program Manager. So I can speak to that. So we're in year 3 currently of our MS4 permit. in year 4, we actually have it set up that we are going to go and inspect all of those detention basins. Each property owner is responsible for their own detention basin. So we actually have that either in wording on the site plan or it's on the plat. So the property owner knows that they're responsible for that. So as part of our points that we are to acquire for our MS4 permit, that is one of the things we are going to take on in the upcoming years. Currently, we have all of the basins actually located by GIS. So we have a layer that we know where they're all at, whether they're private, whether they're public, whether they're above ground, below ground. And if you have a detention basin and it meets the 1% storm or holds that back, then you get a 58% reduction in your stormwater bill. So how we've handled that in the past is if we've had problems with somebody maintaining their basin, that the first thing they get is an NOV, a notice of violation, saying, hey, this needs to be cleaned up. And if that's not done in a timely fashion, then we suspend their 58% credit, which more than doubles their stormwater bill. So I'm happy to report that we haven't done that very often. They usually get it cleaned up pretty quick, but that is the mechanism we use to make sure we have compliance.
I did not know.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. That's helpful, very helpful. Any other questions? You have something?
Mayor Lawson.
Oh, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions on the percent of goals met for stormwater. The slide that was about 3 from the end there. Could you talk a little bit about what those goals are that we have met, and whether it's a yearly goal or just a one-time goal, or how does that work?
So it's a yearly goal. The first one is percent of inlets inspected. And then the second one is percent of the system CCTV'd. And I'm blanking. So that's CCTV is closed caption television, running a robot up and down the pipe to see what the failure is. So I believe one is 5% of the system and one is 10% of the system. I'm blanking on which one's which at the moment, but I can tell you for the last year and the next couple years, while we're blanketing the system and trying to inspect the entire system, we are going to be well above that. But then after that project's over, we'll need to maintain those levels of inspection as required with our MS4 permit. And then the next one is percent of our streets swept, which our goal is 400%. And we have been over that the last couple of years. So that's a water quality issue because whatever we're sweeping and sucking off the street isn't going down the storm drain. So that goal is 400% of the city streets, which on average means we're doing the whole city 4 times. I know that some parts of the city are done more than other parts. Then the last one is resolving the notice of violations quickly within the deadline, which that's the one we haven't met. And there's a lot of things that go into that. I was talking to Trevor, which one was he telling me about, where they were waiting for a part and it just like couldn't, there's supply chain issues. And, I think the last year we 16 out of 18, I believe, was resolved on time. And then that was just barely under the goal. But we still want to resolve the notice of violations quickly.
Is the goal like 90%?
Yes, the goal is 90%. I believe we're at 88 or something.
Okay. So when I'm looking on our, sorry, this is Commissioner Larson. So when I'm looking on our website under the CC4 for stormwater, and I see 75% as a progress indicator, does that mean that 3 of the 4 items you've listed on your slide have been met? Is that what that means?
That is what our Nicoid Engineering Program Manager, that is what that means, with the 4th one being the notice of violations. We just missed that one last year.
Okay, all right. Is there any way we can kind of make that more clear on the website? I don't know how you do that, but is there anything we can do to make it clear as to what those goals are and what that means when it says 75 or 100% or whatever?
Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager. I guess I would say right now that I think our performance indicators are still being tweaked, and we don't want to get kind of lost in the weeds sometimes of should that be 85% or 90% goal. I would be happy to, if someone else wanted to speak, if we were going to provide more detail on that.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, if I may. This has been an arm wrestling match because there's so much data, and these nice people love their data, and then translating so many layers to something that's really tight and digestible to communicate well with our public. All the things that are going into each of our measures has been the tough challenge. So we're open to trying to tweak it. We want to make sure that the data always has great integrity. But the challenge will always be, if we showed everybody all the things that we're paying attention to do this work, that are important to do this work, it'll be hard to keep most people's attention. So I think we could put a lot more detail, and maybe the answer is everything is clickable and you can drill down and drill down and drill down, because there's that many layers of really interesting data about all of our systems. But what they were really challenged to do in this one connected city outcome area is to try and reflect some very different kinds of systems that are interconnected but behave differently, because transit's on there here too. So we're talking about sewer pipes and how efficiently we're moving people on our transit system.
Sure.
Another
Okay.
thing.
Okay, I appreciate that. It's just when I look on the website at these indicators and I just see 75%, I don't see anything that explains, that I can see anyway, as to what that 75% means or what are we targeting. Like they've detailed here the 4 items, which is helpful. So, and I just noticed that. I know we're still in the process of trying to tweak all this, and maybe that'll become clearer as we get it more tweaked. But that's one thing I do notice about the dashboard is it has tendency to, I don't always see where it's real clearly indicated as to what those targets mean, or how they were being accomplished or met, so to speak. So, but I do appreciate the data and then the information. It definitely makes it more clear just hearing this like tonight. I appreciate that.
I hope we'll be able to add, or Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager, I hope we'll be able to add that more detail when we are real confident in how we measure things. Because sometimes what is an inlet inspection, you can kind of get lost in the weeds of what exactly qualifies for that. So I think we're still kind of working through the process on that. With how many CC4 numbers are there? There's probably 60 within the one CC4.
Just in that one.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? I got a little one. You kind of mentioned, but I don't know that you followed up on it. The word I've heard is swales, but I think you used maybe green infrastructure or something like that. We don't really have anything, or we don't really have anything in policy, but I've seen other cities that have gotten grant opportunities and things like that. What do you got to say about that?
I think I'm going to go ahead and punt that, because here in an hour, I think we're going to get, I know we're going to get more detail on that in about an hour. And we have Andy with Burns and Mac, who's much smarter than me. So we will, is that okay?
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Let's make sure there's no public comment in the room. I see you.
I didn't originally come up here to speak on stormwater, but since opportunity, Ted Boyle, North Lawrence Improvement. He made a couple mistakes. He referred to downtown as the oldest neighborhood. North Lawrence Jefferson is. Also, stormwater. We were flooded out in '93 by stormwater. It wasn't the river. We didn't have any water from the river flood us. It was storm water from the north, northeast, and northwest runoff. And the tube going under North 2nd Street, Maple Grove Drainage District from Grant Township, that tube wasn't big enough. And it also was gravity feed going to the river. And so it couldn't accommodate the stormwater from the north of us. Consequently, the North 2nd Street flooded from the Turnpike Bridge to Johnny's. And but then by 95, lo and behold, we got a pump on North 2nd Street. And it's pumping water out of the Maple Grove Drainage District. But it takes us another 20 years to get the pump at 5th and Maple for the residents internally. And at that time, when that pump was put in, $6.6 million, that the city made a presentation that the rest of the work was going to be done in-house by the city, realigning the ditches and culverts and that type of thing. And they said they could do it more economically and quicker than a contractor. Well, we're going on over 6 years since that statement was said, and we're still waiting. And I confer with Matt Bond all the time. Matter of fact, we go on drive tour through North Lawrence and look at problem areas where the water still sits and still floods. If you're within a 3-block area of the pump, you're not going to have water in your ditch. But if you're any further away than that, the water can't get to the pump. And so, and it's always about the money. We all know that. It's always about the money. But you can do things on the other side of town, but you can't finish the project in North Lawrence. And, the people are getting tired of waiting for it. You guys say that and you know what I'm going to hear? Oh, that was previous city commission. Poop. That is. You are the governing body, and you should finish projects that you start on the stated timeline that you say. And Matt is doing his best with the money he's got, but usually about 3 or 4 months into the fiscal year, out of money. And what we get a little piece of the stormwater revenue from the city. We get a little piece.
Sorry, Ted.
And when you run out of money, the water starts getting deep.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public comment online?
Yeah, well, I might not be.
Is there any public comment online? Nothing? Okay. Let's bring it back to the commission. Any other questions or follow-up on that?
I'm actually kind of curious to what Mr. Boyle was speaking about in regards to that project about 6 years ago and its status.
Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager. I will say that, what he was talking about with the flood and stuff where I might not have been precise, I was trying to convey that same message where North Lawrence is kind of like a bowl, the levee around it, and it was you're trying to pump out of it. And the flood from 93 wasn't caused by the river overtopping the levee. It's just like we couldn't get water out of the bowl quick enough. Specific to the Maple pump station, I personally can't speak to any promises made to the neighborhood. I will say that there is a severe lack of staffing in our field group, and we aren't accomplishing a lot of things. And we're doing our best, and we're managing resources as best as possible. The goal of the Storm Asset ID program that we're going to talk about here in a little bit is basically, let's find out where all our storm problems are, and let's judge them equally, and best allocate resources to the issues going forward. If anybody else wanted to speak to specific promises made 15 years or 5 years ago-ish, I wouldn't know about that specifically.
Thank you, Nick. Any other questions?
Was there anybody out there that knew about that like 5 or 6 years ago? I'm just making sure. Or like...
engineering, Matt Vaughn, engineering program manager. I'll speak to that to a certain degree. So what Ted's talking about is we had talked about taking internal crews and trying to clean up a lot of those drainage ditches to get the stormwater in a more efficient fashion to the pump station. Part of the problem is with that is a lot of the, as everyone knows, North Lawrence is fairly flat. And so if I've got, 2/10 of fall in a block, sometimes that's not enough to get the water over as fast as we can or as efficient as we can. So a lot of those projects, like Nick said, have kind of been on hold because we're reevaluating the entire city with the current asset project and putting those all in a ranking system. So we'll talk about a little bit more of that as in the next hour when we talk here on the next agenda item. But that's primarily why it hasn't advanced any farther is we've stopped, we've got this project going, let's see what the specific needs are. So one of the things that I found was interesting when I became stormwater engineer is in the 96 plan, the intersection of 23rd and Osdall was actually a second tier project, which I found a little interesting because that's the only major crossing from the west side to the east side or vice versa in town. And I was like, well, when that's flooded, and it's been like that since I was a kid, and that hasn't done it since we fixed it. In fact, I can tell you in 2019, I specifically went down there during a couple of our heavy rain events, and we didn't even hold a drop of water in that intersection. So I bring that up is because that's a point of, hey, if I had chance, as soon as we were out of our double bond capacity, so Nick showed those 5 projects that we put in, and we were paying double bonds up until 2009, and we didn't pay the last of the stormwater bonds off in 2018. I wasn't able to do a major stormwater capital improvement project until the the 6th Street, Maple Street project was up. And that was funded through sales tax infrastructure money. And the second one I was able to do was 23rd and Osdall, and a major portion of that was funded by KDOT buyback funds. So now that we have our utility up and running, and I would say we're getting there as far as being adequately financed. We still have some things to tweak, that we're headed in the right direction. Nick made a really good point. I know our street division has been anywhere from 6 to 13 positions down for the last 3 years. I think we're right around 6. I think that's right. I may be wrong. But there was a period there for about 2 years, and I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just telling you the way it is. When I don't have field folks to do stuff, I can't go dip ditches. We're just trying to fill potholes and keep up with the basic maintenance that we need. So that speaks to some of what Mr. Boyle was speaking about, and I'll call him Ted because I consider Ted a friend. We've gone out and he has shown me, and we've worked really hard trying to address a lot of the issues in North Lawrence. So,
thank you, Matt.
Nick Hoyt, engineering program manager. I just want to throw in one thing. We did spend this year right around $400,000 redoing the pumps at the Maple Grove pump station right there on North 2nd. One new pump was around $250, and then we rebuilt the second pump that I think was around $130. So I mean, we are still thinking about North Lawrence. We're still, trying to make sure we can get the water out of the bowl. It's a challenge.
Can I make one comment on that about the county? Drainage district, they were going to increase.
Hold on, Ted.
Water.
Hold on, Ted. Give me a second. Let me ask one question, then I'll ask you a question. How about that? Okay.
Thank you.
The street sweeping, Nick and or Matt, and it's clearly a huge job, as you've indicated, not to create new work for you, but that might be a place perhaps where education could go through neighborhoods, because I see it all the time and I shake my fist at the sky when people have their grass clippings in the road and all that kind of stuff. So just as a suggestion, either to you all or to communications, to maybe find some time to speak with neighborhoods and educate them, because neighbors are often the best educators and they're free educators. Just a little suggestion there. I'm gonna go ahead and ask a question about how the county interacts with North Lawrence.
Well,
Ted, I'm giving you 2 minutes. Be focused.
Well, This 3 minutes don't get it, man. But the deal is Maple Grove, John Newmore, which he's chair of the Maple Grove Drainage District, Caw Valley Drainage District, he contacted me and they were going to clear the brush and increase the flow of water coming in on the west side of the airport, and that's where that water come from. So I contacted Matt about it, and he goes, that can't happen because the 2nd Street pump is at capacity right now. So it couldn't take no more water. So then I contacted John Newmore and Matt, and we had a meeting, and a resident out, Don Hickson, out by the airport, they were gonna cut a trench up by his yard to increase the flow. And the deal is the 2nd Street pump can't take no more water. It's at capacity right now. And Matt told me that they've even changed the impellers on it to increase the volume. So
Thank you
we
for
already need another pump on North 2nd Street.
Thank you for bringing that up. Let me ask Matt or Nick. Obviously, there's a larger area which extends out to the county. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, Matt Bond, engineering program manager. So the North Lawrence drainage study that was done in 2003, it actually had provided a project that a pump station be built north of 2440. So essentially they would raise 2440 to keep all the water from Maple Grove drainage from coming into town. And then it would locate a pump station to pick that up from Maple Grove drainage and pump it straight to the Kansas River instead of waiting until it got all the way to 2nd Street.
Thank you. That's very interesting. That's helpful. Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners or comments? Man, that was awesome. Thanks, Nick.
And Jake, you did a good job too.
So great. Thanks, Matt. Thank you so much for being here. That gave us a lot to chew on. I want to check on commissioners' physical well-being here. Do commissioners need a 5-minute break? Carry on, move on. Vice Mayor, you good? Okay. Let's go ahead and move on then to our first regular agenda item. Discussion on possible expansion of utility assistant programs. Thanks, Jake.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Christy Webb, Utility Billing Manager. Let me share my screen. Okay. Hopefully you can see that okay. So this report is in response to an August 9th City Commission direction. And so this, so we don't have an expanded plan that we're offering right now, but we wanted to share some additional information so that we can help determine what the next steps are. So that's what this report is. So some of you may already know this, but so right now, currently, we have the City of Lawrence offers 2 programs to assist with utility bills. So we have a program that was started in 1999 that we call, it's the low-income elderly rate. That provides a 65% rate discount for qualified low-income elderly residents. And then the second program we have, which is one that we just started last year, is a customer donation funded utility assistance program. And I'm going to talk more about both of those in these future slides. So the low-income elderly rate, so to qualify for that, a person would need to be 60 years or older. And then they would have to have a household income from all sources from the previous year of no more than $14,168 or not more than $19,162 if they file as head of household on their taxes. Those income thresholds are based on 110% of the federal poverty level. So those do get reset each year. And then for the utility assistance program that's donation funded, so to qualify for that, so I'll provide a little bit more information than what's on the slide, but those are applications that get reviewed by Catholic Charities. They're going to review those to determine if they qualify, and they're going to look at these qualification criteria to determine if they qualify. So households must have income at or below 150% of the federal poverty level. Assistance must guarantee at least 30 days of utility service or service restoration. And then they are also asked to provide either a disconnect notice or, sometimes it's that bill that says, you're subject to disconnect if you don't pay your bill soon. They also must provide a photo ID of the person listed on the bill because they must live in the house. And then income verification for the last 30 days for all members of the household. So as of September 30th, as of last month, we have 75 people who are participating in the low-income elderly rate program. And then we have 11 utility customers that have received assistance through the utility assistance program. And that assistance totaled $3,956. And because I'll go back to that slide, with that utility assistance program, we are limited to the assistance is limited based on the amount of donations we've received. So, depending on the amount of donations we have that have been paid, that determines how much we can assist each month. I did want to mention, just because we are talking about utility assistance, that there are other community assistance programs that are available that our utility customers have been taking advantage of. Probably the biggest one is the Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance Program, otherwise called KIRA. That has helped quite a few of our customers. As you can see, we've so far received over $800,000 in assistance or donations, or not donations, utility bills paid from that program, and that's assisted 894 utility accounts. I did want to mention, though, that this program, we have received information from KIRA that this program is expected to end this month because the funding has been exhausted. This program was funded through federal funds, and those funds have not been continued at this point. So they are expecting their funding to be exhausted, unfortunately. Another program that we're seeing some assistance come through on is the Kansas Homeowner Assistance Fund. That one was a little bit slower to start, but so far we've received over $12,000 in utility bills that have been paid across 21 accounts, and I think we'll continue to see more of those. So the difference, it's very similar to KIRA, but it's for homeowners rather than people that rent. So I do think we'll see more assistance come through from that program. We're also seeing help through the Emergency Water Assistance Program. That's run by DCF. And so far we've received over $128,000 across 162 accounts. And then, regularly we receive assistance or, utility bills that have been paid through other local agencies. So that's pretty common. That's been that way for many, many years. And typically we'll see at least 45 customer accounts are assisted each month from some of the local agencies. So one of the things that we were thinking about, trying to find ways to expand how we can, help more of our utility customers, how we can impact more people is, the thought was out there to maybe consider tapping into the American Rescue Plan Act funds, but it's not very clear when we read up on that if it can be used for utility assistance, and there is concern, to develop a program around that, whether staff has availability or the capacity to administer that kind of program. So the other thing that we thought of was expanding the low-income elderly rate to additional populations that are younger than 60 years of age. If we're going to expand that program, that funding for that would need to come out of the general fund. So that's a factor to consider if we're going to provide more research into that. I would recommend, if we are going to look at expanding the low-income rate, to use the low-income energy assistance program as an eligibility determinant. just because that program is already collecting, household income information and other demographic information about those households, so that those of us in utility billing wouldn't have to receive those confidential documents, because it's just less confidential documents we would have to worry about storing, and it would be less staff time to have to receive those documents and process those documents and review those documents. So using that as that eligibility as a determinant would make a lot of sense as far as I'm concerned. So I just wanted to throw this slide out here as so if we consider expanding that low income rate, what kind of costs we might be looking at, and this is just this is definitely estimates. And where I got this data, this is from, this was provided from DCF, and based on those households that are eligible for the low income energy assistance program. So using that data and trying to extrapolate that's where this data did come from. So, it is an estimate. It's not, set in stone or anything, but it's best estimate we could come up with for now. So some questions we would have, or some, direction we would be looking for is, do we want to reprioritize work to make, researching, expanding this program a priority? What type of criteria do you think would be appropriate to use to determine eligibility for this program? And then we'd want to consider how the program should be funded if we are going to expand it. So that's what I have. But what questions do you all have for me on this?
Just a clarification question you have the one chart that talks about community assistance available, and you list the several programs, but you don't list LEAP or LIEAP as one of those programs. Are we getting money now from that program?
Oh, good question. So no, that only helps with electricity and gas. It does not help with water or sewer. So we don't receive any funding from that.
I see.
Yeah.
That helps. Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Sellers, you got anything?
I do. Kristen, I had just a couple of questions. In the presentation for the low-income program, it says that household income from all sources, but I don't see the sources listed on the application. What all sources of income are taken into account for the application?
Yeah. So we would ask for any adult living in that household to provide provide information on any income they receive. So say it's someone that is over 60, but they have an adult child living with them, then we would ask for information on income for that person as well. Does that make sense?
Yes, and an adult being anyone 18 years of age and older. Okay. And then for the local agencies that provide assistance, it's usually a one-time, one-off. Do you know if individuals who receive that assistance, are they typically double dipping? So are they able to receive service, funding assistance from Catholic Charities and then maybe from housing cooperative or something else? So do you see that when individuals who are receiving assistance on their utility bills?
We do. And I joined so there's a housing stabilization collaborative meeting that's once a month. And the housing stabilization collaborative is a fairly new organization that connects all the other social agencies in town. It's a great group, and so they meet regularly to talk about. I should back up and say they meet to coordinate how households should receive assistance, which I think is brilliant. So that way they're using their resources the best. And so we absolutely will see households, maybe go to Catholic Charities or the Ballard Center, different times throughout the year and get assistance from both. But I do know that all those groups are aware of that and they're coordinating that very well, so that I think they're making best use of those resources. So, but yes, we do see people tap into multiple avenues for that.
Okay. And then on the community assistance slide 10, Kira, KHAF, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to use acronyms, but the top three that are listed, those are all ARPA CARE/ARPA dollars, federal dollars that they're here until they're exhausted, correct?
Exactly. Yep, that is exactly right. And I can tell you more about the emergency water assistance program, that it is a one-time only assistance. So once a household has received assistance through that program, they can't apply again. Whereas with the Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance Program, I know for a fact people could apply multiple times. I'm not that familiar with the Kansas Homeowners Assistance Fund in terms of if they can apply multiple times, because it's newer and they're still kind of getting through their first initial wave of applicants. So I'm not sure on that one.
Okay. And then my last question is, I know you had spoke a little bit to billing options and support for individuals who are behind, like if there's payment arrangements that are made. And you mentioned that during the moratorium, as that sunset, we did provide payment arrangements, but we've not extended that payment arrangement option for utility services past that, or only for those individuals that experience needing assistance during COVID, essentially, or during the moratorium due to COVID, correct?
That's correct.
Any other questions? Vice Mayor, I can't see you. Do you have any questions?
No, I'm fine. This is Vice Mayor Larson. Yeah, I'm fine right now.
Thank you. All right, then let's make sure there's no public comment in the room. Not seeing any. Is there any public comment online? Raise your digital hand.
There's no comments, Mayor.
All right, let's bring it back to the commission. Any discussion or further questions?
It's kind of a comment but a question maybe for Christy about the Housing Stabilization Cooperative. I know one of your recommendations was using, the LEAP program. What would you thought it'd be about, funding this stabilization with the direction that it has to be used on City of Water? I mean, I know they also get money from AHAB, but if we put additional money in that said needs to be used for Lawrence water bills, which, what do you think about a process like that?
Christy Webb, Utility Billing Manager. Yeah, I think honestly that would also be a very valuable group to channel the money through, just because they're already used to working with these populations, and it's not just a matter of directly providing assistance. It's the counseling and the further resources they can offer that's really valuable too. So it's it's not just a matter of, hey, yeah, we'll pay your water bill. They're offering multiple other ways that they can assist these households. So yeah, I would be very supportive of that, just because I think what they do is excellent work, and I think they utilize their resources really well. And like you were saying, I think it would, to earmark this funding specifically just for City of Lawrence water bills would make a lot of sense, because right now they're having to take their funding and stretch it between rental assistance and electrical bills and water bills, so it gets spread pretty thin.
And someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think the county used OPA funds to help support the Housing Stabilization Collaborative. I believe they did. So again, I'm not sure if that's a kind of a way around, using ARPA dollars to fund something like that, as opposed to, directly using it for our own utilities. I could see that being slightly different. Jeremy jumped on. I don't know if
It almost identifies as supportive services, but I don't want to.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Jeremy Willman, Finance Director. Thank you. Not to muddy these waters at all, but there is some flexibility through the ARPA program using the revenue loss provision. We could essentially expend these dollars and then just reimburse ourselves from the ARPA if that's your wish, utilizing that revenue loss provision of the ARPA code rather than going to a program specific code. Which Christy is right. There's no provision in the water infrastructure section of the ARPA that would allow for utility assistance. So just to, we really haven't had a discussion about, how we earmark the ARPA allocation yet. But you certainly could, within the revenue loss provision, make an allocation for this type of expenditure for governmental services.
And Jeremy, this is Commissioner Littlejohn. That would be short term, though, until the ARPA dollars are expended. Then we would have to figure out other options, right?
Jeremy Wilmoth, Finance Director. That is correct. The ARPA ends in 2024. There are provisions, however, in the ARPA to go to 2026 if the funds have been obligated, and that word is sort of being contested right now as to what that definition means. But this type of program would end in 2024. I don't believe it would meet the definition of obligation that's currently being discussed by the Department of Treasury.
I will say I just looked up Douglas County's list, and among many uses, they list $1 million to the Housing Stabilization Collaborative Shared Rent Use Utility Assistance Program. So.
Any other discussion?
Chris and I had just a couple of things, maybe because I've been sitting on them for a couple of weeks, but thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate the commission deferring this until I was here. I don't know if I was meant to be the star of the show or just a discussion starter. I looked at this, I thought about, the conversation that was had during the AHAB meeting in regards to funds for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and using affordable house and those dollars being used for affordable housing and supportive services. So I was looking in that vein of funding opportunities in addition to ARPA dollars. To Commissioner Littlejohn's point that it would only be for a short term. As far as the billing options, not the billing option, let me back up a little bit. As far as the eligibility for the program, I do believe using the LEAP eligibility puts us in line with that. I was a little bit worried about the use of the 110% of the federal poverty line. It kind of sounds like that was maybe, most programs don't use that because that's not on kind of the chart of standards. So it's kind of like nitpicking but I mean, there's programs that use 138% as well, and that's not on the chart. So I do appreciate the idea of using LEAP's eligibility criteria for that. Some high-level thoughts that I had about the program and looking at it and maybe doing a little bit deeper thought on how to restructure it or potential scenarios on restructuring it, possibly as a tiered approach. And so anyone that's up to 138% would be in that 65% discount, and then anyone from 138 to 150% of the federal poverty line would receive a 45% discount. how that comes to pass is that if you look at national averages and based on the chart that you provided in the presentation, utility monthly income, utilities should not exceed more than 10% of one's monthly income. So a utility bill such as water, stormwater, sanitation should not exceed anywhere between 2.5% and 5%. Using that two-tiered approach, seeing that most, I would imagine, or I'd hypothesize that most of our individuals under 60 would be under that 138, and then the 138 to 50 would be available for those if we expanded eligibility. As far as expanding the eligibility, what eligible populations that would be, definitely would consider individuals who are receiving VASH services or vouchers or assistance through the VA, individuals that have a permanent disability, and then as well as individuals who are 60 and plus, in addition to those who are receiving housing vouchers. My rationale for that would be that most of those populations are on fixed incomes. And what we've heard from our partners is that as an individual is receiving a voucher for housing, any way to streamline their utility payments would allow for dollars to, that would increase the ability of dollars to be leveraged and stretched more to benefit more individuals. So I wouldn't necessarily say that this would be an all call for individuals to participate, but I would focus on those populations, as those are populations that are adversely impacted by high utility rates. So individuals with vouchers, SSI, permanent disability, individuals receiving a HUD voucher, as well as any individual over the age of 60. Other than that, I would like to see us take a little bit more deep dive into this. I imagine something of this capacity is not going to impact. We're not going to bring this into effect within the year, or even for the start of fiscal year 24. I would hope, but I think there's more work that could be done, especially if the commission is open to utilization of affordable housing dollars to address this, since we know that the Housing Stabilization Cooperative have received dollars, and more than likely they've been using those dollars not only for rental assistance, but for utility assistance. We know LEAP is only for electricity and for gas, and so our water utilities are usually left with little discount support. And so I think if looking at it based on the numbers you provided of individuals who qualify for LEAP, if we knew what those numbers were based on that tiered system of a 65% discount for those under 138 and then a 45% discount for those within the 138 to 150, I'd kind of like to see what that number would look like based on the chart you provided of the costs, what that cost would be. And I imagine that it still would require additional staff costs, and I recognize that. But as far as the what that total bottom line of that 609, does that number change if we were to use a tiered approach? And I know that there's been tiered approach used in other municipalities that use a little bit more aggressive federal poverty eligibility, and so I'd like to keep it at 150, so since that's been the standard that we've used here in the city.
I think that tiered approach sounds like a good approach. So yeah, that's definitely something we can look further into and try to drill down on what the cost impact would be based on that.
Yeah, and I know the response to our questions, you did provide the number of individuals in the community that receive vouchers, and so I think that becomes our target group in addition to those who are 60 years of age and over. And there might even be a lot of overlap between vouchers and those 60, and maybe not. So this gives us an opportunity to maybe get a more, not a finite, but a number that we can then use to plug in and figure out what that cost would be annually to the city. So, thank you.
Any other comments? Go ahead.
Just a couple thoughts. One, certainly to the extent we're using general fund dollars, I do think we're looking at 2024. So I think we have some time to look at some possibilities and see how that might fit in. Obviously, we'll have some discussions about ALPA funds, and again, certainly open to other considerations. But I do think, I'm pretty confident we can use ALPA funds like the county on the housing stabilization collaborative. I know that, they've got some money, of course, from the county. They've put in a $500,000 application from our affordable housing fund, along with many other applications. Whether or not it's funded, be for a later date. But I understand, talking to some folks at Ballard today, they are giving out $53,000 a month is their allocation. And this month it was out on October 1st. They used all 53,000 in one day. And now anyone who's applying is waiting until November 1st when there'll be another 53,000 to give out. So the need is high. That's what's in the current housing stabilization collaborative, as I understand it. And so, I do think it's, as we talk about what we do with ALPA, I do think that's something that we could look at and use some of that money for the next year. Well, knowing that that's just a 1-year fix, looking, further ahead as we look at, some programs, for the 2024 year. Got my thoughts.
Any other comments, Vice Mayor? Oh no, try again. Oh no, you have nothing. Okay. I want to make sure we answer their policy questions here. This deeper dive, so you say wasn't in our staff work plan this year. Do you want to give them direction to reprioritize that?
If there's an opportunity for us to earmark ARPA dollars for it, then I think it becomes a priority.
But I'm interested again. I'm not sure what they meant by this year, and Christy maybe can explain. But I do think we have an extended period of time if we're not looking until 2024 to implement it. And I also think using outside groups maybe to funnel that money through or take it off our staff. So that was kind of my thought process on that.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Littlejohn, when are we anticipating that ARPA conversation to happen? Or do we have a plan for that yet?
I'm not remembering that we scheduled anything yet.
Okay.
Try to see if there's anything.
You were gone that night.
It's in.
Yeah, we have not scheduled that yet, but the commissioners had expressed that you wanted to get that back soon, so we're working to prepare that conversation for you.
Christy, I saw you turn on your microphone there. I wondered if you were going to maybe approach the question or the suggestion that Commissioner Finkeldey is bringing up is there a kind way to work with our partners without using them amiss?
Christy Webb, Utility Billing Manager. Honestly, I feel like in my work that I have done with them, I don't feel like they would feel that they're being used. One of the things that they're always struggling, like Commissioner Finkeldey said, is they're running out of funding so quickly, and so to have additional sources for funding I think they would be very, very happy about that. Now, I mean, I don't want to speak on behalf of them. That's the sense I get, is that, the funding just is getting exhausted so quickly, especially now. They had some more resources earlier, but it's more limited now. So I do feel like that would be a really good partnership, and like Commissioner Finkel said, it would save some staff time if we're not the ones reviewing and approving those applications.
I will make a note that I don't, and I point of clarification for Commissioner Finkeldine. I'm not interested in giving lump sums of money to organizations to dole out for utility assistance. That doesn't get to the root of the policy issue. The policy issue is that we have individuals who are that have limited income. And so if they're spending more than 10% of their income on utility costs, then their income burden, their rent burden, mortgage burden, and now utility burden. And so I get that this may require additional bodies. This is why I'd like to see more about what this could look like and how do we map this out. But the idea is that by expanding the current utility discount program, we're becoming partners in this with our community, with our social service agencies, to leverage their dollars that will be able to help more individuals. And we're also hopefully mitigating the number of individuals who become delinquent on their bills, or the debt that we charge off because of individuals who don't pay their bills. So I just want to make sure that I'm not interested in dumping money to agencies. I'm looking to become partners in that we create a policy that we're still providing a service to our community, but we're providing a service at a reduced rate for those who are burdened and that need that additional support, and that we know that they're always going to be here in our community, but we're being good partners and with our social service agencies and helping them leverage their dollars to support them.
Yeah, I don't think we're disagreeing. I guess I'm saying that I was talking about the ARPA money, and for 2023, we don't yet have that program in place. And I think we can use ARPA money to do that. I think what you're talking about is the longer run, right? 2024 and beyond. And so you're using 23 as a stopgap. Yeah, I'm just saying, are we going to do anything in 2023? Well, one possibility is to use all the funds
to be that stopgap. Gotcha.
To do that while we look at a bigger program.
Gotcha.
Okay, then that brings us to our next question, which you kind of touched on. Is there, I hear one commissioner saying for sure they're interested in using the LEAP criteria. Is there any comments or agreement among other commissioners?
Well, again, I would only say I think the LEAP criteria is a good criteria. I do think we want to find criteria that minimize the work that we do. But I do think, for example, some of the things Commissioner Sellers talked about, the voucher program, for example, if you're on a voucher, you qualify. That would be another way that takes little work, but allows us to get to some of those answers. Right. So I think LEAP is okay, but I think it's also okay maybe to look at some of the other variables. I do agree we don't want to get into the position of gathering lots of information and sorting through it and doing all that internally. If there's easier ways where someone else is doing that for us, I think those are the ones we want to look at.
And I would imagine we can use, and Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, I know LEAP is for individuals who are at 150, that 150% federal poverty. So, I mean, if there's someone that we're not exceeding that. So anyone, even if we say up to 150%, anyone that is from 0 to 150 would qualify. So it allows for us to use that streamline.
Vice Mayor, I see you.
Yeah, I would be in agreement with on the LEAP, using the LEAP as a criteria along with the vouchers. That seems reasonable to do that, and obviously can be time and staff savings on that. I am concerned about, again, any discussions on using ARPA funds for these ongoing expenses in a program. I'm interested in a long-term program that's gonna help our community members, in the long term, so to speak. And so I'm less apt to be agreeable to use ARPA funding for that. I do like the idea potentially of looking at whether or not through AHAB any of the funding could be used there through AHAB. I look at it. I'm not sure yet. I'd have to know more, but.
Kristen, I'll go back real quick and say, as far as I know, the first part of your question on the policy is work plan for this year, and I know Commissioner Finkeldye kind of alluded to this. I'm not necessarily interested in that. Something has to come back to us within this calendar year. I mean, if it's something that you all want to pick up maybe in the quarter, first half of the quarter. I think that's doable. That'll coincide. That'll run concurrent with the conversation that the commission will have about ARPA dollars. And then if a decision is made, then that funding would be available. So, as far as staff working on this, it doesn't necessarily. I don't feel like we need to have something back before the end of the year.
Christy, okay. Billing manager. Thank you, Commissioner Sellers. Yeah, that does help provide some clarification.
And then that leads us to our last question, which is a little more open-ended, but we've talked about it a little. How would we prefer to fund an expanded program? I interpret that to mean long-term and expanded.
I think once we get the report back from Kristen, I think we can have a further discussion about that. Like I said, I brought up AHAB. Commissioner Finkeldye discussed using some ARPA dollars as a stopgap, but as far as expanded, I don't know if we can fully commit to something right now until we can at least see what Kristen and her team puts together, and we can have further discussion on that.
Agree? All right. Christy, did we give you everything you need?
Yeah, I think we are good to go with the next steps and see what more information I can gather and bring back for further discussion. So yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristen.
With this.
Thank you. Have a good night.
It is 8:05. Or commissioners want to push ahead, or do they need a 5-minute break?
I imagine this next agenda item is going to be a bit weedy, so we probably need to take a break.
5 minutes.
I'll give you 5 minutes. Everybody be real quick. We'll be back at 8:10.
Almost.
Ready, Mayor.
Kurt? We're now returning to our meeting. That brings us to our second regular agenda item, which is to receive an update on the Stormwater System ID Assessment and Model Creation Program.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Matt Bond, Engineering Program Manager with Municipal Services and Operations Department. So in addition to the Connected City update that Nick provided to you a little earlier this evening, this presentation is intended to provide you with a brief update on recently completed and ongoing stormwater projects. And then we also wanted to provide you with a deeper dive into the details of the Stormwater System ID Assessment and Model Creation Project. So if you recall back on February 15th, we provided you with an update on the field activities of this portion of the project. And tonight we'll focus more on the stormwater modeling and the technical portions of the project. So somebody advance the slide for me. So this map shows the stormwater projects where we began construction this year. As most of the residents around town are acutely aware, we have a lot of construction all over town since the beginning of this past spring. I'm happy to report that several of those stormwater projects have been completed, such as 13th in Kentucky and West 30th Court. However, the larger projects that you see on this map of Sharon Drive and 17th in Alabama are currently still under construction. We do plan to finish Sharon Drive by the end of this year and wrap up the more extensive 17th in Alabama project by the end of summer next year. As you may recall, the 17th in Alabama project is to solve the flooding issues along Missouri and Alabama streets during intense rainfall events. Once complete, I'm confident that seeing pictures of people canoeing down Alabama will be a thing of the past. I should also add we intend to have all of the work on 19th Street and south of it completed by the end of this year. At this time, I'd also like to thank all of the residents who are adjacent to these stormwater projects. They have all been extremely patient and positive during our construction. And even though I don't have this, we don't have this on the map, one other thing I'd like to highlight is even though the construction to rebuild 19th Street and 23rd Street are not specifically stormwater projects, both replace and upgrade the entire respective storm sewer systems on both of those projects. Next slide. So the stormwater projects that we currently have under design are Freedom Hill Court, East 24th Street, Johnson Avenue, 9th and Maple Lane, and 11th in New York. We are also in the planning stages for Wilshire Drive. And then I'll conclude with the Jayhawk watershed. Back on April 12th, we provided the commission with the findings of the Jayhawk watershed study. The consultant is currently working on 60% plans from the Kansas River to approximately 9th and Mississippi. And the survey work and the geotechnical work are currently being wrapped up. So with that, I'll pass it back to Nick.
Go to the next slide, Andy. Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager. So Matt said that in February, we came to the commission, we presented the results of the field work of the Storm Asset ID program. So kind of just wanted to refresh everyone's mind of what we're trying to do. So from the previous presentation, I was talking about we weren't getting the job done with the resources we had. So in the last couple of years, there's been more resources since, and see all the projects we're doing. Now, the other thing we're trying to do with those resources is set the groundwork to make good decisions for decades to come. So what this project's all about is balancing resources and the need, figuring out where those needs are and making good decisions with those resources. So we're trying to do three things. The first thing is, where is our storm system? Let's know that, what conditions it is in. So that's kind of the field work. And we've been doing that all throughout town this whole year. And then we're finishing up the pilot study on kind of the data management part, modeling, and how do we establish CIP projects? Because one thing we know for sure, these projects are extremely expensive. Jayhawk watershed, for the whole watershed, it was like $35 million, right? Because kind of we, as I was showing before, the storm sewer buried in the ditch is not the level of service we want it to be, right? It's also
extremely impactful, right? So it's like, who is ready for 19th Street to be open? I live in Southeast Lawrence, and like, yes, 23rd Street construction affects my life and my family every day, multiple times a day, right? And they're rebuilding the entire storm system of that street. That's why it's taken a year and a half, right? So it's a ton of money and really impactful to the citizens' lives putting in the storm sewer system. So let's make good decisions. So that's where we're going to bring Andy in. And we got all this field data in. Let's analyze that and let's determine what type of level of service we want to provide. How can we make improvements as things get redeveloped? How can we change our design criteria? And then what can we do in terms of capital projects to kind of get everyone on the same playing field? So with that, I'm going to turn it over with Andy. He is live from a conference in New Orleans. And I'm sure he wants to spend his New Orleans evening with us. So Andy with Burns and Back.
Thanks. Thanks, Nick. Good evening, commissioners. Andy Sauer with Burns and McDonald. I'm the project manager working with the Trek Design Group, who's the prime contractor for this project. I think Aaron Jones is on the phone or on the Zoom meeting as well from Trek. And then from Burns and McDonald, we also have Mitch Godigan on, who did a lot of the obviously heavy lifting as far as the modeling. Some of the results we'll show tonight. So as Nick introduced, we'd like to kind of walk you through what we've been working on as a team. And when I say a team, I mean it also involves both Matt and Nick and other staff members. We've had several workshops, more than just meetings, of working through this. So we're really trying to lay the groundwork for being able to evaluate the entire city at some point. That's why I went through a pilot phase, so we could get the process in place, and that's what we'd like to talk about here today. So as mentioned earlier, back in February, the first two items of the data of the pilot study were reviewed at that time. The process development, the data collection. What we're here today to talk about is some of the results of the modeling process of how we're going to prioritize capital improvement projects across the multiple watersheds, and then really trying to understand how we can best use the funds that are available to the maximum benefit. That's really what we try to focus on. And so with that, we developed this watershed model process. So with that, we've gone through these various scope items. So it started with evaluating and selecting models. When I say models, I mean computer simulations that represent the both historical rainfall events as well as design events that we'll talk about here later. So we went through an evaluation process. The two models that were selected that we've been using is a model called PC Swim. Well, we won't get any more into the modeling than that. So PC Swim is one of the models we're using, as well as a Corps of Engineers model called HEC or HEC-RAS 2D. Both for Swim and HEC-RAS, we're using this in 2D, and we'll show some of the results, which means we're able to simulate the flow of water, not just in one direction, one dimension, but in two dimensions. So we're really using much more accurate models that simulate not only pipe flow, which I'll show later, as well as surface flooding. We then went and applied those models to our pilot watersheds, which were Northwest Burroughs and Quail Creek. We're going to focus on Northwest Burroughs tonight, just really for the time management here tonight, but we also did Quail Creek as well. But we'll be focusing on Northwest Burroughs tonight. And then through that, we created these detailed models, and you'll see some of those results tonight. And then we wanted to define the stormwater evaluation process. The reason you do a pilot is to really hone in on the process, because we want to be more efficient as we move forward with the rest of the watersheds. And then from that, we built off of that of one, we're having more accurately being able to simulate flooding. We're then going to show you how we're going to evaluate watershed improvements. And the key being, we're looking at this on a watershed basis, not a location by location. It's looking at a systems approach across the watershed. And then what I'm most excited to discuss tonight is how we're looking at trying to define the affordable stormwater solution. So for other utilities like water and wastewater, it's pretty typical to do kind of a knee of the curve analysis, but in stormwater, it's pretty rare. So I do want to, pat the team on the back here a little bit that really kind of setting a new process here that's really an industry leading industry standard now of looking at stormwater solutions differently, more like a utility, more about how can we maximize those benefits. But as you see at the bottom of the slide, our goal, of course, is to ultimately have a comprehensive, prioritized citywide process for stormwater improvements. And so that's what we're building towards as we'll show some of those results tonight. So what I'm going to focus on tonight is just some background. I'll show you some of the modeling tools and outcomes, and we'll talk about how we define this affordable capital improvement process or ultimately get it going to the plan for the CIP. And then throughout this, I'll be focusing on the watershed process, that evaluation process. So our goal as a team was we wanted to create sustainable stormwater solutions that provide the greatest benefit at the most affordable cost. That seems somewhat simple, but it's a challenging statement when you talk about stormwater because there's various storms, how rainfall occurs now in the future. So how do you sustainability? So as a team, we started to talk about some of these questions. And they start with, are we investing?
I don't know. You're dropping here and there.
Sorry. I know I got a deal said I had a bad connection. Am I better now?
You're okay right now. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, let me know. I know Matt and Nick are both have my phone number, so they can text me too if I drop. So I apologize. What are the total benefits of the proposed stormwater solutions, right? So we're trying to focus on multiple benefit solutions. Are we maximizing our current assets? And I think that's very important in fully developed watersheds, such as Burroughs Creek or Jayhawk, where you have a lot of stormwater assets that are already in the ground. Our solutions need to maximize those. We can't be ripping up every street to replace the pipes. So how can we make a systems approach that improves the overall level of service? And then finally, what's really not most important, but important item to keep in mind is, can we maintain what we have now and what we're going to be putting in the ground? So all those were factors that we considered as a team around developing sustainable stormwater solutions. So hopefully here, slides advance maybe. There we go. So sustainability, just the basis of sustainability. We're trying to do solutions today that are affordable, that don't impact future generations to meet their needs, right? And so the pillars of sustainability that I'm sure you've all seen, what's our environmental impact? What's our social community impact? And what's the economic impact? But when we think about that from a stormwater management standpoint, environmental means to me is stormwater, if we think of it as a natural resource, as our solutions start to look different, can we manage that stormwater closer to where it falls with green infrastructure? From a community benefit, can we create more public benefit than just conveying water in a pipe that no one sees? And then on the economic side, can we build more affordable solutions? So that's what we mean when we were talking about stormwater sustainability. And so what does that infrastructure look like? I'm sure many of you are familiar with these types of infrastructure that's out there. Some of it you may not see daily, but obviously our streets and our curbs and our gutters are part of the collection system that conveys stormwater down to typically some sort of a curb or great inlet. Once it's in the inlet, it's typically in a conveyance pipe, sometimes referred to as a storm sewer. And we have a whole network of pipes out there that the TRECAs have been investigating, and that system goes into our system model so we can evaluate that. Within the system, you also have storage, where that's above ground, like a dry detention facility like shown here. It can be underground storage, it can be wet storage. And then finally, we're discharging that to channels and streams, but then those streams cross other infrastructure like streets and roads. So we have culverts and pipes that go underneath those. So that's all part of the system. But on the watershed approach that we're taking on this project, we really want to look at what's the most affordable integrated solution that may encompass all these types of infrastructure, right? It's not just one size fits all. We need a combination of these solutions to have the greatest impact. So what we modeled, and I know this is kind of a very simplistic graphic, but I think it tells the point, is we're modeling the enclosed system or the pipe system. We're modeling how that's collected, but we're also modeling if that pipe system reaches capacity and it can no longer intake more stormwater, we're also able to model the surface storage or surface flooding, also referred to sometimes as overland conveyance. So once the pipe is full, we have surface conveyance down the streets. Obviously, sometimes that gets deeper and we have flooding. It goes over the curb and can impact property. So we're able to simulate that with these models, and we'll show some of that later. And then we're also simulating the creeks and ditches and streams, the open channels, such as Burroughs Creek itself, for example. We're simulating that as well. So all those things are being simulated, and like I mentioned, in 2 dimensions. So once again, we're using state-of-the-art system models and the data that elevation data that the city already had collected, as well as the data that the TREC is collecting as far as the system, as far as pipes and inlets. So what drives stormwater models? What drives stormwater models is actually the rainfall amount, intensity that we assume and we put into the model to say, okay, what does this type of rain cause as far as flooding, for example? And so up until a few years ago, most of the rainfall data we were using was from the 1950s and 60s. And recently, what's referred to as NOAA Atlas 14 came out, and it's a much more recent rainfall analysis. What's great about it is it provides both annual exceedance probability, what's the chance of a certain event happening, but also within that given year, we also get an occurrence probability of that particular event. So we're able to look at a lot larger range of different events. It's better data. And instead of just looking at one event, we're looking at multiple events so we can do this knee of the curve analysis that I'll show later. So bottom line, we're using better data and a range of events so that we can get a better understanding of the current level service for the system we have and the future improvement needs. So when we define flooding, of course, it means different things to different people sometimes, but in general, on the far left here, this is what we consider from an engineering standpoint that no flooding is occurring. So the system is working, as you see in the picture here, it's coming down the gutter. There might be some 2 or 3 inches of water on the street, which obviously we don't want people, flying down the street, speeding on these types of streets, but it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's collecting the water. It's going into the inlet has capacity. But that still doesn't mean that when we look at improvement alternatives that we might be able to optimize the existing system and to reduce that cost of ownership. This gets back to the point of we don't need to replace everything. We can optimize the system. So we need to understand that. So that's the no flooding condition. The center picture there is what we call minor flooding, and where it's going more than 6 inches. It's exceeding the right of way. In this case, in this picture, it's over the sidewalk. It's impacting private property. But in general, it may not be yet, hopefully not entering a habitable structure. But obviously our goal, as a level of service across the city, we'd like to be able to eliminate this flooding for the more frequent events. Those events that have a probability that we'll talk about later, of 5 or 10% in any given year. We want to reduce that and eliminate that so we don't have that flooding anymore. And on the far right is the major flooding. I think Matt actually referenced this of someone canoeing down the street. So obviously we want to reduce that as much as we can based on the cost of those solutions. We may not be able to completely eliminate it, but we want to get it reduced down to where we're not impacting habitable structures and we're allowing emergency vehicles access, which generally means we want to get it down to less than 6 inches or at least have the center part of the lane open so we have emergency access. So that's what we're talking about when we're looking at our system improvements. This is what we want to help solve as we move forward with this program. So here's the steps we went through, and I'm going to walk through each of these steps, hopefully along the way, so it's clear of what we went through. We modeled the existing conditions. We then looked at a range of solutions that I'll show you for Northwest boroughs, which is shown here in this graphic on the right. We then estimated the cost for those improvements to reduce the flooding based on those different range of rainfall events we looked at. And then we applied a cost benefit process to define the affordable solutions. So what does the model look like? The model of existing conditions used both truck data as well as elevation data. So this is Northwest boroughs, Central Middle School's kind of right in the center. The yellow lines, hopefully you can see them, are the pipe network. We've modeled up to 18-inch pipe diameter and larger. So anytime you do kind of a systems model, there's a point where you don't have enough, really, we want to have enough detail to have a good model. We don't need to go up and model every single smaller pipe. So at some point you have to say, this is, as far up as we're going to go. And for this analysis, we looked at 18 inches and larger. And then we're modeling everything in 2D. That's what's kind of the blue area. And so the darker blue means deeper flooding. The lighter blue is shallow flooding. So hopefully here, see if I can play this for you. Hope this works. So this is what an actual rainfall event. We used historical rainfall events to kind of validate the model. So as the time goes along here, you'll see blue start to form along 16th Street, flood up around New Hampshire, and down along 15th Street. As the event starts to subside, you see the pipe system has capacity and starts to dewater the streets. So for each of the events, both historical events and design events we'll talk about later, this is what the 2D model provides to us, this detailed analysis of not only what the pipe capacity is, but where the surface flooding occurs. So then we validated those model results. This particular picture on the right was provided by the homeowner at 16th and New Hampshire. It was actually a video showing basically almost exactly what our model predicted for that same rainfall event. So it's always very helpful to have data like this, pictures, video, that we can then validate that what the model is simulating is what residents actually saw. So that goes a long way in making sure that the tool represents real world. So then next, we went through a range of solutions. So we put in different rainfall amounts and intensities into that model I just showed you. And so what the events we looked at are shown in this table. The top part of the table is the lower event. So that's a 2-year. And that in any given year has a 50% annual exceedance probability. And then like I mentioned with Atlas 14, the new rainfall data, we can also divide that up into occurrence probabilities. And so we can look at a wider range of different types of events. And so that's what this table is showing. We looked at rainfall volumes from 2.6 all the way up over 5 inches of rain, and peak intensities from a little over 1 inch to over 5 inches. Just for point of reference, the current Northwest Borough system has less than a 2-year design event. So these older systems, it's not untypical that they have a very low level of service. So I'm going to show you results for each of these events here shown on this table. So the first event, so as we walk through this, you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, the amount of rainfall that was simulated, and then the peak rainfall intensity for that event. So for the 2-year 50%, the only area that had surface flooding was along 16th Street there, shown in blue. As we move up, now we're simulating 3.35 inches or 1.3 inches per hour intensity. That's equal to a 5-year 50%. So you see more flooding now along New Hampshire. We add more rainfall, more higher intensity, more area floods. So we move up to the next one, more area floods. And then our final one we looked at was 10-year 10%. So you can see quite a bit of an area is filled in there with blue. We have flooding outside the right of way. And so that's what we looked at, a range of events there. Okay. So then next we wanted to say, what would it cost to reduce or eliminate the flooding that I just showed you? So we did a planning level cost for each of those. So I'm going to walk through those in reverse order now. Here's the largest one, the 10-year 10%. To meet that level of service, we'd basically have to upsize or replace all the pipes that we simulated. So that's over 7,300 feet of pipe. We would disrupt a lot of the neighborhood here with tearing up the streets to put in bigger pipes. And the costs would be approximately $7 million. As we move down to a slightly lesser design event, about 4,600 feet of pipe, we're now at 4.7 million. Similarly, as we move to the next event, we're impacting lesser area. 2,400 feet of pipe would need to be upsized at a cost of about 2.5. And then the 5-year 50%, we're at 1.2 million, lesser amount of pipe replaced. So with each of those, like I mentioned, a planning level cost. We did also make cost assumptions that when you're doing larger pipe, you're going to have a certain amount of street replacement cost. We're going to for adding back trees and seeding of the right of way. Oops. Hope I didn't lose you guys again.
Yeah.
Did I break up again?
Yeah, it's okay. You're okay now.
Keep getting this little warning, like, oh no, okay. And then we're also, as I think Nick and Matt have talked about, more of this corridor approach. So we're also adding in some costs for any type of water, wastewater utility crossings it may have. And then curb inlets and box junctions are also included in there. So this is a comprehensive planning cost that we're going to. So we've built this cost tool that we can apply so that we have some uniformity of evaluating all the costs. So hopefully here, my slide will advance. There we go. So I'm not going to go through all the detailed costs. I just wanted to give you a snapshot that we are putting quite a bit of detail in this cost tool. This is what it looks like. We are carrying a planning level contingency of 30%. We're adding in some typical percents as lump sum for different things that we can't do a detailed cost at this level for. We want to carry those costs. And then, of course, since our lovely time that we're in with inflation, we're also adding on another 10% for inflation. So we want to have this total kind of all-in cost for these different solutions I just showed you. So then we take those costs and we can do a benefit cost analysis where the top part, where we model the existing condition and then we show the improved condition, that's our flood benefit. And that flood benefit is represented as reduced flood risk. And I'm going to expand on this graph here in just a minute. And then this is that knee of the curve analysis. So I'll go to that one here next. And so here you see that range of solutions we looked at, the cost for each of those, and then the reduced flood risk. So the current system on any annual or any given year, based on the occurrence probability and the event probability, is somewhere has a risk of the current system, let's say 37% approximately. And so what we're doing here is we're trying to get the greatest flood reduction benefit at the most reasonable cost. So that's the knee of the curve analysis. So for this particular watershed, Northwest Boroughs, the highlighted blue area is what would be recommended for the most affordable solution that gives the greatest benefit. So each watershed that we evaluate could have a slightly different knee of the curve, but the idea is to maximize your financial resources and provide the greatest flood benefit. And so with that, this base stormwater improvement for Northwest Boroughs is estimated or budgeted at 2.5 million, assuming that 10% inflation. We're also recommending that you budget for some other resilient type solutions when you're in these watersheds. We anticipate there's going to be a certain amount of stormwater infrastructure, such as the pipes, storm sewers, that may need to be rehabbed or lined. We also recommend that in certain areas that you may consider doing some green stormwater infrastructure to build that resiliency of the system, whether that's some pervious pavers or street or tree planters. I'll show you some examples of that later. But to carry a budget of each of these watersheds so you can help bring back some green infrastructure to increase the resiliency of the system. And then finally, there's always going to be some additional point repairs as you're getting into the design that need to be done. So carrying another 5% in the budget for point repairs. So what that looks like, once again, for Northwest Boroughs, that's our focus area tonight for part of our pilot, is a recommended base solution of that 2.5 million, which would be replacing or upsizing over 2,400 feet of pipe, adding or replacing additional stormwater inlets, adding back 25 trees in this case along the street corridor. And then because of the amount of pipe you'd be adding, you'd be replacing a certain amount of curb and gutter, and then a certain amount, about 1,200 feet of in the street. Then we carry additional budget of other right-of-way improvements for rehab, green infrastructure, and point repairs. And the estimated watershed CIP would be 3.1 million. The benefits would be over a 32% reduction in flooding. We would be optimizing the recent improvements. So if you see in this figure, hope I didn't lose you guys again. Okay.
You're good, Andy. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. I keep getting this unstable network. Sorry. And then the blue area is improvements that have been done in this watershed since 1996. And so this gets back to this idea that we want to optimize the existing system. So that lower part of Northwest Boroughs, there's not any additional room to get more pipe through there. So this solution optimizes that and allows us to work more as a total system. It'll have less disruption to the neighborhood, and it will add back green infrastructure and trees to this particular solution. Okay, and got a couple more slides. The final thing we wanted to talk about tonight is this idea about one size doesn't fit all. So when you look at Northwest Boroughs here shown in these three zones, we talked as a team about there's different improvement needs within the different zones. So I'm going to first start with zone 2. That's the area we just talked about that we modeled. That's a network of pipes that are 18 inches and larger. So in that zone, what we're going to be laying out across all these different watersheds is this idea of an affordable CIP to increase the level of service. We're going to try to preserve overland flow paths. So that means maybe aligning streets so they can carry water when the pipes are overwhelmed. And we're trying to optimize that existing system for that lowest cost of ownership, right? That's zone 2. Now in zone 1, when we're above that, the value that the public value is more in, can we retain and detain stormwater where it falls? Can we add back green infrastructure? We don't need larger pipes being put at the top of the watershed. We need to right size those pipes to meet this downstream capacity, which we now know with the model. And then we want to try to disconnect directly connected impervious areas. So a parking lot going directly down to a street, can we intercept that with some green infrastructure? Can we provide a greater value before it gets into the pipe system? And at the bottom end of the watershed, zone 3, that's where we need to be setting back from rivers and streams. We may want to consider becoming, what's called a cooperating technical partner with FEMA, helps, reduce some of the insurance rates and things, and just continue to meet your floodplain regulations. So what we're going to come back with in a few months are some ideas about how the stormwater criteria can be updated and things. So we just wanted to introduce this today because we're really leaning towards kind of looking at different areas within watersheds may have different design criteria to maximize the value, that public value of the overall system. So we just wanted to kind of introduce that tonight. And then I just put in some pictures here of what those might look like. In zone 1, this is a project I did for at least some of that upper left picture, is a pervious pavement project, or a pavement where that's the actual collector. So the water sheets flows off and those pervious pavements, let it flow through. There is no curb inlet. You could do street planters. Zone 1 to zone 2, that's kind of where you get into some smaller kind of regional solutions. Obviously, zone 2, we're going to be increasing the pipe capacity. In zone 3, you want to set back from those floodplains. So my final slide here, I think, before I go through what's next, is what we talked about as a team. We want to increase this public value, and that's kind of this connection between resiliency and sustainability. And I really think what this study is doing is it really is providing that broader collaboration and holistic system planning for the design and management of the public infrastructure. So I think what I'm saying here tonight is I think through the commission's leadership, as well as Nick and Matt's leadership, we're really starting to connect these two items. And that's exciting to me because a lot of communities are not doing this. And it does take a lot of planning and evaluation. But once you get to that point, you really can come up with some solutions that I think will be far more resilient and are sustainable. And that also includes financial sustainability. So what's next? We're continuing field inspections that Trek is completing. We're going to be modeling the rest of Burroughs Creek, as well as pulling in the Jayhawk watershed model. We're going to be utilizing these study results I showed tonight to help inform the stormwater criteria updates, or I should be saying that the stormwater criteria updates have already been applied to some of the newer projects, such as Jayhawk, trying to get that knee of the curve analysis. And then through this, like I mentioned, we want to define some recommendations that we'll be coming back to you with about updating the stormwater criteria or areas within the stormwater criteria that need updates. So with that, I'm going to put it back to Nick, I think.
Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager. So as we've been figuring out this modeling work over the last few months, we've been doing a ton of field work of just finding where is our system and what condition it was in. We had hoped by the end of this, early next year into this year, that we would pretty much have all the field work done in kind of this whole pink and green and yellow area. We're still working towards that. That field work is combined Trek Design Group and city staff. So the city staff have been real. We assumed that they would be about 80% on this project, and that's been flipped because we've been doing a lot of they've been doing utility locates, meter reads, water main breaks. They're getting pulled off this project. So I kind of have a hatched out area there that we are hoping to accomplish by the field work by the end of this year, and that's kind of in question right now. But regardless, we're going to have a ton of field work at the end of this year, over half the city. So then in the next year, we're going to kind of be running huge amount of data through that kind of modeling meat grinder that Andy lined out. And then within probably 2 years, we'll have the whole city done, right? And then we'll be able to judge kind of everything equally. What's the level of service in this neighborhood to that neighborhood? Where are the different flooding problems? And it's not just based on complaints or, hearsay of this area flooded. So with that, I will say some of that rainfall questions, and Andy was going through the percentages of the different rainfall. He had to explain that to me about 5 or 6 times before I got it. So some of it's really technical, but with that, if you have any questions, we will try to answer them as best we can.
Thank you, Nick. Any questions? At the moment, Vice Mayor, I can't see you. You have any questions?
Yeah, I think, or did she? I think she said no.
No? Okay. Anybody else like do public comment here? Let's see if there's any public comment in the room. Ted, you got any comment on this? Oh, okay. Any comment online?
No, Mayor.
All right, very good. Back to you, Nick. Any questions or discussion other than how cool this is?
Yeah, I'd like to. It's a very impressive process. And Andy, thank you for your work and thanks for being here from New Orleans. Yeah, very impressive. And as we talk about where we're going in the future, to have this data and to have this analysis and understand where best to utilize our dollars is really going to be invaluable. I mean, we're going to spend money, but we're going to know where we're spending it. So I appreciate that a lot. So thank you for the work on this.
Yeah, no problem. Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager. I will say at the moment, the data is almost like a fire hose. It's coming but I think it will be incredibly useful for a lot of projects, right? So we're looking at repaving 6th Street next year. And it's okay, now we already know the condition of the storm sewers underneath the street and adjacent to the inlets adjacent to it. And hopefully we can not find the problems as we dig them up, So I'm hoping that we kind of take that data and get it in a usable form quickly to help with sidewalk projects and street projects and the water main projects. And what's the condition of that storm sewer in the planning phase and not during the construction phase?
I just had a quick question, Commissioner Littlejohn. This is all awesome. Especially being able to know exactly what's going on with our infrastructure. Once it's all mapped out, like a couple years down the line, what do you anticipate? Do you have any anticipations of what it'll take to go ahead and maintain? Because I know just in the mapping process alone, we don't have enough folks to go ahead and do that process. Will it just offset each other with efficiencies, or do you?
Are you talking about maintaining the system?
Yeah.
Maintaining the model.
Maintaining the system. I know that's quite a bit ahead of time, but I figure like the more stuff we know, the more that, more people it'll take to go ahead and, make sure it's okay.
So I think, or Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager, if you remember that triangle way back at the beginning, we were balancing resources and needs, right? And what was that balancing on? It was basically information, right? So I think when we get, the goal is at the end of the project, we'll have the information of where's our system, what condition is it in, how much is it going to cost to get it to where we want it to go. And then that's a decision where you guys can make good decisions about where should the rates be to accomplish that goal. And it's not kind of just shooting in the dark of let's make the rate increase 10% and that'll make it somewhat better, right? So I think the goal is if we're increasing the rates this much or maintaining them, we will know what does that mean in terms of our system and what level of service we can provide and what projects can we get done. That's my goal at the end,
right?
When we for the project is be able to make good decisions.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. This is very informative.
And I guess the only other thing I'd say, and you mentioned this earlier, and I'm not saying you aren't going to do this like I'm saying something really smart, but I think the other benefit of this would be saying, this is the best way if we were just doing stormwater, but now all of a sudden we know we're renovating New Hampshire Street because the street needs to be redone. How do we use those two pieces of information and say, well, we might not have done it based upon this model, but because we're going to be there anyway,
right,
let's do it. And that might change and be able to use that information integrated. I think is really where you see the big bang for the buck.
Right.
And vice versa. If we think this is what we have to do for stormwater and, we were going to repair that street 4 years from now, let's repair it now and match those up. I mean, I think we double the benefit.
Right. Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager, that is it in a nutshell. So it's like, if we're going to do a project on mass to, make it more of a multimodal thing, someone should be able to quickly look, what is the condition of the storm sewer? What needs to happen with the storm sewer and have that part of the plan instead of we get way down the road and we're promising you that project's going to be done on this year. And then like, oh, well, we need so many millions of dollars for the storm sewer system. So, and I think it works both ways. And the end of this isn't going to be a CIP list of here's the order or the next 100 years of the projects we're going to do. It's going to be like, here are the needs. And when they overlap with other projects, sanitary, pedestrian, or whatever, then we know what needs to happen in that location. And, you know, the projects will kind of form themselves much better. Yeah.
And Nick, just to piggyback on that, I think where my mind went thinking forward is to that piece as you have that list of projects and how they overlap with other projects. I guess my thought is, as a commissioner, thinking of when it comes to the budget and our CIP process, do we then need to account for that? And is there a way to account for that in the CIP process of rating the different projects? If there's overlap, you know, does that get a bump then because there's potential overlap? So we then elevate that score then becomes more elevated. So that's where my thought was going with that. So I do appreciate that, as well as your meat grinder analogy there. But at least to Commissioner Finkeldye's point, I think where we have an opportunity here to see is that this information will then provide another data point within measuring and scoring the CIP. And is there a way, do we need to weigh that? And that's a potential question for commissioners, for the commission.
Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager. So the way the projects are scored now in the CIP to align with the to align with the strategic plan kind of plays into that, right? So if we have a corridor approach where we know we want to add, you know, bike facilities, redo the sidewalk, upgrade the street, and solve the stormwater flooding problem in a certain area, and we're able to kind of know all those things going in, that project is going to align really well with the strategic plan and score extremely high.
Okay.
So, but it's all about, you know, knowing the projects that need to happen at each location, so we aren't digging up the street 10 times and closing the street 10 times.
Right.
But if we have that information, it'll feed into the scoring system as it is now, align with the strategic plan better, and we'll get better projects in the end for sure, and save money.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Matt.
Engineering Program Manager Matt Bond. I was just going to dovetail into what Nick just said. We're doing that where we can right now. So like with the 17th and Alabama project, we already knew that we were going to inconvenience the neighborhood considerably with the storm sewer. So we're also replacing the water line along 18th Street with that project. So we're not waiting for all of these to come to fruition. We're acting on them as we're getting the data in. So the 19th and Maple Lane project that I mentioned that's in design now, that dovetails not only storm sewer, but also street condition and sanitary sewer. So, you know, to kind of double back to 17th and Alabama, we specifically stayed out of that area with some of our street maintenance because we knew this project was coming. So as we develop more and more data and collect more information, like Craig was talking about, is how much we love our data, and Nick's saying that we're drinking out of a fire hose, then we can align our water line, our sanitary sewer, our storm sewer, our pavement condition index, what we're doing with the sidewalks and the ramps and those things, and we're bringing them all together as collective projects so they're more comprehensive. So when we go into a neighborhood and we do a CIP project, we're doing it once, hopefully, as soon as we get all the data in, and then we're not coming back to inconvenience that neighborhood for hopefully the design life of whatever we just put in the ground. So, you know, the bottom line is, hey, we touch this and then we don't touch it again for 40 or 50 years. And then we continually do that and make better decisions on where we're going and how we're going to prioritize them, but then also on material sides too. So like everything we're seeing is corrugated metal related. They're probably not going to like me to say this, but so we took it out of the specs several years ago because I can't have pipe that's in the ground that's only going to last 20 years. So one of the things that we had tasked Burns and Mac with is, hey, some of our criteria, I don't think we're getting the bang for the buck, like on detention basins. We need to look at that again because the storm and the rainfall intensities that have increased, we all saw that in 2019. I personally can tell you 5 different events that were stressing our system. And it's like, okay, what are we going to do to actually help us out? So one of the major things that we're doing with this project is taking a hard look at detention basins and how we do that. And that's why we're looking at NOAA Atlas 14 and how those rainfall intensities go.
This is Commissioner Larson. Yeah, I had a couple of questions. So did I understand you correctly that we expect to have all the field work and data collected within 2 years on this basically half of the city? Is that what I heard?
The original plan was Trek and Burns Mac's current second contract that was executed in February. The original plan was that would be done about March, and that would basically get all the field work east of Castle, roughly. We aren't quite getting there because our city staff has been diverted to other things, but we will be close. So I don't know if we can go back to that pink map, but we will have the field work done close to 50% of the city by early next year.
So then this is Commissioner Larson again. So how long will it take you to do all the modeling?
Right now, I think 23, 20, the whole program throughout the whole year or throughout the whole city is supposed to be done by 25. 25,
okay. So as we get this modeling data in and we evaluate the costs and the scoring and whatnot, how do we work to keep the modeling relevant as time goes on? Because obviously we won't be able to do all these projects, at one time or even, within a span of a few years. So, and I'm just thinking back to the 1996 stormwater study that we did and the list that came up at that time, within not too many years down the road, that list itself had already been outdated. So what do we have? What will we have in place to kind of guard against that to make sure that these models stay relevant?
Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager. Precisely, that hasn't been figured out if that would be done in-house or if we would contract that out, let's say every 5 years or 10 years or whatever. I would say that we're currently building a model of the sanitary sewer system with a different contract, but with the same modeling software. So I think that's going to give us a heads up to keep both models up to date. If we did that in-house or externally, where we could at least use it, we only have to train our staff on one modeling software. But that's going to have to be a decision made down the line once both models are built. And we can't really make that decision now because we don't know what capabilities we have in-house. But I can tell you it's a tremendous effort to update those models. I don't know, Andy, would you care to mention just how other cities keep their modeling up to date, or you want to talk about that a second?
Yeah, Andy Sauer with Burns McDonald. One of the things I did want to stress or add on to what Nick was saying, one of the advantages we have now compared to back in 1996 is the models are geospatially referenced, right? So the data that Trek is collecting directly goes into the model. So now we have a complete picture. It's a one-to-one comparison, which is a huge advantage from 10 or 15 years ago. So that makes updating the models a lot easier. As Nick said, what other cities do, it does range, but the first thing is you do want to have somewhat of a standard modeling platform. So PC Swim is one that a lot of folks use. It's a good, very good modeling software. So once you start to do that, then keeping either internal staff updated on, training and being able to do it, or some cities do on an annual basis or a quarterly basis, will contract out and have a consultant update the model and keep it relevant. So there's different ways to do it, but I do want to stress the advantage we have here is it's that one-to-one. So what we've identified in the field is what's in the model. So that isn't always the case in a lot of places. So,
yeah. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's all the questions I had. I did want to say though that this is really impressive work that I'm seeing here. It's great to see it kind of come together after a few years of getting it going. I think it's looking great, and I'm looking forward to kind of see how it continues on. And I will say this, Andy, that I've sat through a lot of explanations of modeling, with hydrology, and your explanation of this at the high level you did was probably one of the best I heard. So I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you again, Andy and Nick and Matt. Thank you so much. Fantastic. All right, let's move on to commission items. Are there any items commissioners would like to discuss?
This is Commissioner Sellers. I do want to bring to the commission for consideration a motion to reconsider regarding the rezone that we heard last week, specifically the Z2200216, which was the 1100 Castle Drive application. And I think after a lot of thought, I realized that in regards to this particular point, there were some aspects of the rezoning application that I believe I didn't do my due diligence to fully examine, which I feel like left me with an abrupt judgment. And so I would like to have us reconsider and reexamine that particular request for rezone.
I guess the process would be Tony, a motion on that?
Yeah. Yes. Right. So Mayor, I would like to move to reconsider the request to rezone number Z-22-00216, which is approximately 3.4 acres from RS7 district to RM12D district, located at 1100 Castle Drive, which was submitted by BG Consultants, Inc. on behalf of Christ Community Church.
That's second.
I have a first and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's 4. Nay. Nay. That passes 4-0 or 4-1. Staff, it will come back in a future date.
Yes. Go ahead.
Randy?
Mayor, this is Randy Larkin, Deputy City Attorney. It'd be my suggestion that kind of reopen the hearing
on this and then defer it to November 15th. That will give planning an opportunity to give notice to landowners within the area and other interested parties and hear it at that time.
Thank you. So we need another motion for that.
So I move that we open a public hearing in regards to the request to rezone Z-22-00216, which is approximately 0.4 acres from RS7 single dwelling residential district to RM12D multi-dwelling residential district located at 1100 Castle Drive, submitted by BG Consultants, Inc. on behalf of Christ Community Church.
And defer it.
And defer.
To November 15th.
Okay, and to defer until November 15th.
I'll second it.
I have a first and second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That passes 4-0. Any other?
4-0.
I'm sorry, 5-0. Sorry, any other commission items?
I just had one, and it's just more of a comment per se. I just wanted to make sure that even though we've changed the scope of what we do in terms of sustainability, that we still maintain a relationship with the county since they've taken on more of that burden. I just want to make sure that we're kept abreast of kind of what's going on in that regard, because I think it's really important in terms of what they're doing and the potential partners that, that could come in play, especially with Panasonic on the horizon and the advanced energy companies that were presented to us through our economic presentation or work session a couple weeks ago. I think it's a really good opportunities. I want to make sure that we're keeping on top of it. So.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, let's move on to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item is a response to a question that came up regarding Mill Street right of way. Sales tax report is in there. Exceptionally good trajectory on sales tax. Future agenda items, and then we were the first in Kansas to undergo an audit by the EPA with their new rules for our MS4 permit. So we went through that process and we'll be getting results back. We're already making some improvements based on some of the interaction we had there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Vice Mayor, this is a public comment item.
This Mill Street confusion on the city's part, we've also researched it, and I've seen the paperwork that you got there from the mayor, 1889, vacated Mill Street 130-some years ago. Well, Mill Street has been, you guys want to call it an alley or whatever the hell, that Mill Street, that's been there since the turn of the century, the last century. I've gone back. And if you look on any of the old maps or anything like that, I don't care if it's from 1901 to 1920, Mill Street is where it is today, which you can get on there and your GPS will come up Mill Street. And I have conferred with other residents in North Lawrence of my age, and it has always been Mill Street. So somewhere along the line, the city has put those signs up on Mill Street because there was Mill Street street signs at the end of the block. And before the levee was built, it used to go around the corner to 3rd Street. When the levee was built, then everything moved north, the right-of-way of that Mill Street. And so property lines moved, and but Mill Street, it has been there. It is there, and mayor of 1899 vacating it, and your city engineer, Cronin, argued with me on this, that the 400 block of Mill Street, the existing Mill Street, and the 300 block, 3 years ago, that those two roads were vacated, and the city took the signs up at the end of the 300 block and the end of the 400 block, took the poles up and the signs out about 2019, middle of 2019. And we go, what the hell is that about? And so then the city is calling us liars, and I have another resident that visited with me and you, Brad, Iris Craver, and she was the one that Cronin told that they vacated that alley, and even under the threat of moving the trash cans on Elm Street, which you can't do because it's a one-way street and there's parking on that side. So one, we don't like being called liars. Two, historically, the oldest neighborhood in the city, even before this side was founded, these streets were in that area. So I know what the deal's going to be. I'm going to be told to shove it, and the North Lawrence Improvement's going to be told to shove it, and the residents are going to be, because historically, 1889, they vacated Mill Street. Maybe Mill Street was in the river down there, but it isn't from 1920 to present. It's Mill Street is where it is.
Thank you, Ted.
So, but thanks for screwing it.
Any questions, commissioners? Comments, Vice Mayor? Nothing?
Don't like calling.
Any questions for staff? I don't know. I don't.
Tell me about city staff. You can take that.
Any other public comment?
No, Mayor.
All right. Bring it back to the commission. All right. Then we can move on to the calendar. Are there any calendar items to be added or questions about? Vice Mayor, you're not muted. Do you have something to add? Okay. All right. I guess with that, I will entertain a motion.
Okay, move to adjourn.
Second.
I have a first and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes 5-0. Thank you, everyone.
Do you need Doug's signature on this?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't put
Get
this
him
in
before he
there.
goes.
What's going on?
I just